Committee on Oversight and Government Reform under the authority granted to it pursuant to House Rule 10. Accordingly, House Rule 10 grants the committee broad jurisdiction for the committee to conduct investigations of any matter at any time. This interview was requested by Chairman James Comer as part of the committee's investigation into President Biden's alleged mental and physical decline, the Biden White House's efforts to hide that from the American people, and any unauthorized executive actions. Can the witness please state her name and spell her last name for the record?
Sure. Karine Jean-Pierre. Last name is spelled Jean-Pierre.
Thank you. On behalf of the committee, I want to thank Ms. Jean-Pierre for appearing here today. The committee appreciates your appearance for the interview. My name is Jake Greenberg, and I am Chief Counsel for Investigations for Chairman Comer. Under the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform's rules, you are allowed to have counsel present to advise you during this interview. Do you have counsel representing you in a personal capacity present with you today?
Yes, I do.
Will counsel please identify themselves for the record?
Raphael Prober from Aiken Gump.
Abigail Coleman from Aiken Gump.
Raul Paz, Aiken Gump.
Thank you. For the record, starting with the majority staff and the additional staff members, please introduce themselves with their names, title, and affiliation.
Peter Spector, professional staff member for the majority.
Ellison Tolan, counsel for the majority.
James Rust, deputy staff director for the majority.
Grant Skiles, intern for the majority.
Amari Collins, intern for the majority.
Sharon Oots, senior professional staff for the majority.
Jessica Collins, House majority.
Bill Harness, staff assistant for the majority.
Thank you all. Mr. Comer?
James Comer, Chairman, House Oversight Committee, Kentucky.
Thank you. Ms. Jean-Pierre, before we begin, I would like to go over the ground rules for this interview. The questioning will proceed in rounds. The majority will ask questions for an hour, and the minority will have an opportunity to ask questions for an hour if they so choose. To the extent members have questions for the witness, they will be propounded during their side's respective rounds. Do you understand?
I understand.
The clock will stop if the witness needs to confer with counsel, when counsel for the witness is speaking, and when members are speaking during the opposing side's round of questions. We will alternate back and forth until there are no more questions. There is a court reporter taking down everything I say and everything you say to make a written record of the interview. For the record to be clear, please wait until the staffer questioning you finishes each question before you begin your answer, and the staffer will wait until you finish your response before proceeding to the next question. Further, to ensure the court reporter can properly record this interview, please speak clearly, concisely, and slowly. Also, the court reporter cannot record nonverbal answers such as nodding or shaking your head, so it is important that you answer each question with an audible verbal answer. Do you understand?
Yes.
Exhibits may be entered into the record. Majority exhibits will be identified numerically. Minority exhibits will be identified alphabetically. We want you to answer our questions in the most complete and truthful manner possible, so we will take our time. If you have any questions or do not fully understand the question, please let us know. We will attempt to clarify, add context to, or rephrase our questions. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
If we ask about specific conversations or events in the past and you are unable to recall the exact words or details, you should testify to the substance of those conversations or events to the best of your recollection. If you recall only a part of a conversation or event, you should give us your best recollection of those events or parts of conversations that you do recall. Do you understand?
Yes.
You are required by law to answer questions from Congress truthfully. This also applies to questions posed by congressional staff in this interview. Do you understand?
Yes.
If at any time you knowingly make false statements, you could be subject to criminal prosecution. Do you understand?
Yes.
This includes both knowingly providing false testimony, but also stating that you do not recall or remember something when in fact you do. Do you understand?
Yes.
Furthermore, you cannot tell half-truths or exclude information necessary to make statements accurate. You are required to provide all information that would make your response truthful. A deliberate failure to disclose information can constitute a false statement. Do you understand?
Yes.
Is there any reason you are unable to provide truthful testimony in today's interview?
No.
Please note that if you wish to assert a privilege over any statement today, that assertion must comply with the rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Pursuant to that, Committee Rule 16C1 states, for the chair to consider assertions of privilege over testimony or statements, witnesses, or entities must clearly state the specific privilege being asserted and the reason for the assertion on or before the scheduled date of testimony or appearance. I would enter as Exhibit 1 a letter transmitted to your counsel dated August 21st, 2025, from Mayor, Mr. Gary Lukowski, Deputy Counsel to the President. This letter informs you that President Trump has determined not to assert executive privilege over your assessment of former President Biden's fitness for the office of the President and your knowledge of who exercised executive powers during his administration. The letter also states that President Trump will not assert immunity to preclude you from testifying before the House Oversight Committee. Ordinarily, we take a 5-minute break at the end of each hour of questioning, but if you need a longer break or a break before that, please let us know and we will be happy to accommodate. However, to the extent there is a pending question, we would ask that you finish answering the question before we take the break. Do you understand?
Yes.
Do you have any questions before we begin? It's my understanding your counsel wishes to raise a few points before we begin.
Yes, just a couple process points I wanted to run through, and thank you for the opportunity. As counsel for former White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, I would just like to note that she's here voluntarily and appreciates the opportunity to answer your questions on this topic. We would request the opportunity to review the transcript for errata or any typographical errors before any public release. And if there is going to be a public release of the transcript or video of the interview, we would ask that it be released in full, so it is accurate and the context is provided. You had referenced the August 21st authorization letter from the White House counsel's office. Appreciate you mentioning that. I wanted to also note that while she is authorized to address the topics you noted and privilege is not being asserted, she has been instructed that she's not authorized to reveal information which is prohibited by law or court order, including classified information, and she will not. And I don't anticipate there's anything that would be at issue in any event. She will be testifying based on her firsthand experience with her time in the Biden administration and on the topics the committee has identified as relevant. And I would ask, with your indulgence, Ms. Jean-Pierre has a very short opening statement she would like to read into the record, if you're willing.
Thank you. Noted for the record, we are not doing opening statements, and we're going to proceed with questioning.
Okay. In that event, I would ask perhaps when it's the minority's time if they would be willing to allow that to be read into the record.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
My clock reads 10:14. The majority's time will begin now. I'll turn it over to Peter for questioning.
Thank you. Ms. Jean-Pierre, just a couple of background questions to start. Where did you attend college for your undergraduate degree, and what year did you graduate?
I attended New York Institute of Technology, and I graduated in 1997.
And what was your degree in?
I got a bachelor's degree in pre-med in biology.
And then you went on to get a master's degree from where and what year?
Columbia University School of International Public Affairs.
Thank you. To start out with, I understand that you announced in June that you've written a book that will come out, I believe, in October, titled "Independent: A Look Inside a Broken White House Outside the Party Lines." And I think simultaneously you announced that you are leaving the Democrat Party to be an independent. Why did you leave the Democrat Party?
So I have been a public servant for almost 20 years. I've been part of the Democratic Party since I voted. None of that in the sense of my support for the Biden-Harris administration, my support for the Democratic Party and its ideology, that has not changed. That is certainly who I am and what I will continue to support as far as the platform. I believe by being an independent, I can be much more helpful by being outside of the two-party system, and I think that I can get a lot more done. That was my decision.
When you say be more helpful, what do you mean by that?
Just, I think as someone who had a platform for a long time and has become a notable voice, I feel that I want to have a voice that is my own, and in that realm that would be independent.
And as part of the Democrat Party, you didn't feel you were able to have a voice that was your own?
I think that I spent 20 years working for either a principal, if you will, in those 20 years. And so obviously I was working for someone. And I think now that I'm no longer in a public servant role, I feel that that shows just me not being in a public servant role, that I'm an independent voice. And that's how I see myself moving forward.
You said in a statement to CNN, I think around the same time that your book came out, that, quote, "We need to be clear-eyed and questioning rather than blindly loyal and obedient as we may have been in the past." What did you mean by that?
I think that's kind of the definition of independent, if you will, right? It means that you're standing for your own voice. And that's, I mean, I think the title of the book kind of speaks for itself in that statement.
So to whom did you believe you were blindly loyal and obedient in the past?
I don't think it's to whom. I think it's more of stepping away from a two-party system and just standing and having my own voice.
Former Vice President Harris has a book that's coming out soon as well, it sounds like. And there's been some recent reporting on what that book contains. There was an article released, I believe, yesterday with a source from the Biden administration that said, quote, "Vice President Harris was simply not good at the job. Quote, she had basically zero substantive role in any of the administration's key work streams and instead would just dive bomb in for stilted photo ops that exposed how out of depth she was." Do you agree with that?
Can I just ask if I can interject quickly? Is this sort of on topic and relevant for the discussion of President Biden's mental acuity? I just want to make sure we're staying focused.
Yes, I think the decision for President Biden to step out of the race is relevant to that question, and therefore Vice President Harris's role in that is relevant.
Can you repeat the question?
Vice President Harris was simply not good at the job. Quote, she had basically zero substantive role in any of the administration's key work streams and instead would just dive bomb in for stilted photo ops that exposed how out of depth she was.
Well, I'm not going to speak to a source unknown. What I will say is, as White House Press Secretary, my role was to lift up the administration, and that included the Vice President, obviously the President, and to continue to talk about, to discuss what we were doing on behalf of the American people. That was my focus, and that's what I did every day.
So some of the reporting on what's in Vice President Harris's memoir includes, and this is a quote as well, quote, "It's Joe and Jill's decision. We all said that like a mantra, as if we'd all been hypnotized. Was it grace or was it recklessness? In retrospect, I think it was recklessness. The stakes were simply too high. This wasn't a choice that should have been left up to an individual's ego, an individual's ambition. It should have been more than a personal decision." Do you agree with Vice President Harris's characterization there?
I haven't read the book. I didn't even read the article or the excerpt from the book, so I out of context, I can't speak to it.
Do you think that it was reckless to leave the decision up to President Biden?
What I can say is, on that question, I can only speak to my observation and what I believe in my role as White House Press Secretary. I think for the president, any president, it doesn't matter if it's President Biden or any other president, deciding to run for a re-election or making that decision is it's a personal decision. And my role was to support the decision that the president made.
Did President Biden allow for input on that decision?
All I can speak to is my role as White House Press Secretary. My role was not to give my opinion on something that was a personal decision for the president to make.
Okay.
So you disagree with Vice President Harris that it was a reckless decision?
What I'm saying is that I did not read her book. I did not read the excerpt. I can't speak to something that I haven't even delved into. What I can speak to is the role that I played, my observation, and I do believe any president, it doesn't matter if it's President Biden or any president, deciding to run for re-election is a personal decision. My role as White House press secretary was to move forward with whatever he decided.
And respectfully, I'm not asking necessarily about from your role as White House press secretary. I'm just asking you, do you think it was reckless for President Biden to seek re-election?
I think it was his personal decision, and he made that decision, and I supported it.
Thank you.
And I wouldn't characterize it that way. I would just say it's his personal decision to make, and he made that decision. I wouldn't characterize it in the way that the question was framed.
I guess I bring it up because certainly I haven't read your book. It's not out yet, but from how you've portrayed it here, to me, it would seem that you could speak freely about this in retrospect now. You don't see it that way?
Can you say more to your question?
You
I
said,
understand what you're asking.
when I read the quote, we need to be clear-eyed and questioning rather than blindly loyal and obedient as we may have been in the past. Certainly I understand your role in the Biden administration was to defend the administration's positions, but you've left the party and you say that so that you don't have to be blindly loyal and obedient.
Well, I will say this. You're focusing on one particular quote. There are many factors that led to me leaving the party, and I'll just leave it there.
Did you feel you had to be blindly obedient to President Biden?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it that way, the role that I played. I would not characterize it that way. What I will say is that it was an honor and a privilege to be White House press secretary. It's something that I feel very lucky to have been able to be in that role and to be speaking for the President of the United States and to be speaking for the American people was incredibly important to me and the Biden-Harris administration. And my role was, yes, to give information, but to do it in a transparent way. And that's what I did day in and day out.
And not to belabor the point, but I do want to try to understand what you mean by blindly obedient. You said it wasn't to necessarily a whom, but it was something else. So what specifically did you feel you were blindly loyal to?
Well, I just want to be really clear here. We're using one line from a press release, and there were many, many factors that led to me becoming independent. And I think I was very clear. I said that I didn't want to be part of a party, any party. It doesn't matter if it was Democratic Party or Republican Party. I wanted to step out of that and do the work from the outside. And so there were many factors. I know you all are reading one particular line, but there are multiple factors as to why I decided to be an independent.
Your book will also reportedly examine, quote, the 3 weeks that led to Biden's abandoning his bid for a second term and the betrayal by the Democratic Party that led to his decision. Is that something that will be addressed in the book?
Can you read that again?
Sure. Quote, the 3 weeks that led to Biden's abandoning his bid for a second term and the betrayal by the Democratic Party that led to his decision.
And you're asking me?
It's reported that that's something that you will address or examine in your book. Is that true?
Yes. I mean, that's what it said in the transcript, correct?
So just briefly, what do you mean by betrayal?
Look, I'm not going to go into specifics, into details, but I think it will be... I'll step back for a second. You could be assured that everything that I'm saying today is accurate and concise. And that's my goal of being here today. I think I've been very clear about the book, about why I wrote it, in sense of wanting to step out of the two-party system after being a public servant for decades. And I'll just leave it there.
Well, and I understand that. I understand the book's not out yet, and I understand that's an uncomfortable position. So maybe I can ask it a different way. Do you think that the Democratic Party betrayed Joe Biden?
I'm not uncomfortable. I'm just stating that the book will speak for itself.
And respectfully, ma'am,
Yeah.
this is an interview before Congress. If you're refusing to answer the question, I mean, you can note that for the record, but this is the time to provide detail. We
You
are
certainly did not refuse to answer the question.
saying that you're not going to get into detail. This is the time to provide detail. You used a word, betrayal, and we're trying to understand what you meant by that.
Okay, but I also believe that what I wrote is pretty clear. What the press release says is pretty clear, and I think it lays out what the book is going to be and what the book talks about.
What was the betrayal that you were describing?
I mean, you just read the line from the transcript.
Okay, well, we will return to those last 3 weeks, but we can proceed from here.
Yeah.
We'll take a step back and talk about sort of your general career background. I understand you've had a long career, so we can sort of move quickly through some of the earlier ones, but what was your first job was it out of college? Did you work between undergrad and graduate school?
Yes, I did. I worked for a non-for-profit out of college.
Okay. What do you recall what that was called?
It was focused on education.
And then after graduate school, was that when you worked for a New York City counselor?
Correct.
And then after working for Mr. Gennaro, you worked for John Edwards' presidential campaign in 2004, is that right?
I worked for City Council Member Gennaro, and then after that, I worked for City Council Member James Sanders, and then after that, I worked for another organization in DC.
And then John Edwards' presidential campaign?
Yeah.
And after the campaign, where did you go next?
Which campaign?
After the 2004 Edwards campaign for president.
If I remember correctly, no, not to 2004. I did not work for the 2004 John Edwards campaign.
Okay, what year did you work for the John Edwards campaign?
It was 2008.
And then in 2008, you also worked for Barack Obama's campaign, is that right?
That's correct.
What was your role on that campaign?
In both campaigns, I was Southern Political Director, Regional Southern Political Director.
And then after the 2008 campaign, you joined the Obama White House, is that right?
That's correct.
And what was your role?
I was also in the political department, but I had the Northeast.
And you served the whole first term, is that right?
Not the whole first term, just for 2 years.
And then you joined...
Let me step back. Before I did the political office, I was a White House liaison.
And then after 2 years, you went where?
To go into, move back to Chicago to do the re-elect.
So then you were on the 2012 re-election campaign. Did you work in President Obama's second term in the White House?
No.
Where were you working during that time?
I think I did some consultant work after the campaign.
And you worked for Martin O'Malley's 2016 presidential campaign, is that right?
For a brief moment, yes.
And then we can skip ahead here. When did you join the Biden 2020 presidential campaign? Do you recall?
I believe it was May of 2020, going into the general.
And then if I understand correctly, at some point you were on vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris's side of the campaign, is that right? Or was it at the transition?
It was the running mate. When she became running mate, I became her chief of staff.
And did you have a role on the transition team?
As an advisor.
And then once President Biden was inaugurated, you were principal deputy press secretary, is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
And then eventually you succeeded Jen Psaki in May of 2022, is that right?
Correct.
And you served the remainder of the Biden administration in that role, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So if we take a step back, when was the first time you met President Biden?
If I'm remembering the year correctly, it was 2009 during the Obama-Biden administration.
During the administration. So you did not meet him on the campaign trail at all in 2008?
Not that I recall.
And what was the frequency of your interaction with Vice President Biden during that time?
I can't remember the frequency, but if he traveled in my region, I saw him often.
Just, I guess, to get some context.
No, I understand. I don't want to lock in on the amount of time, but
Sure.
I saw him often enough.
And would this be in a room full of people, or did you have meaningful, direct conversations with the Vice President as well?
I did. And I traveled with him, yeah.
And did you advise him as well?
As it relates to my job.
So during that time,
Sorry, Peter. Can you give an example of what you mean by that as it relates to your job
Yeah,
in
sure.
this position?
Happy to do it. I was the Northeast political director. So in that role, anytime he traveled in the Northeast, I traveled with him when he was doing specific political events.
And what would you advise him on? And then,
Because I was the person who kept an eye on what was going on the ground for the administration politically. If he had questions, I was able to answer those questions. That's it. And it was just what was happening on the ground in that state.
and during that time, when you first had met and interacted with Vice President Biden, did you notice that he had a stutter?
I honestly can't remember specifically if he had a stutter. Obviously, this is something that he talks about very often, and he was always open about his stutter. But I can't remember in 2009 if that came up or if I even noticed it. But I know that he talked about it pretty regularly.
The reason I ask, and I use the word stutter because I believe that's the word that President Biden used, and we talked about this a little bit with Anita Dunn, who recalled not noticing or knowing about his stutter until he made it public at some point, I think around 2020. Is that how you recall it as well?
Look, I don't specifically remember. Obviously, that's her recollection. I can't speak to that, but I don't remember specifically when that came up. But I know that he has talked about it pretty regularly. And look, I don't think anybody who has a stutter, that prevents them from doing high level and executing high level issues and problem solving.
Of course, we're trying to understand sort of a change over time.
Yeah.
And later on, I think the stutter was an excuse at times used later on in the campaign. So I think I'm just trying to get a sense for, what the evolution of that was over time. So you don't recall specifically during that time?
I don't. I just know that on the campaign, I do remember him meeting someone who had a stutter, a young boy who had a stutter, and connecting with that young person. And he would have conversations about what was his trick to try to get through his stutter, which I think was kind of like his humane way of connecting with people. That's what I remember.
Of course, and this is the 2020 campaign?
This is the 2020 campaign that I'm talking about.
so in 2009, and I won't hold you to exactly 2009, but in that range, did you ever hear President Biden stutter?
I honestly don't recall. I don't recall hearing that. And I did interact with him, but I don't recall that.
How would you describe his communication or his communication skills during that time? 2009-ish.
2009. He was, the Joe Biden that people talk about, very friendly, very open, wanting to know everybody, who was everybody in the room. He was not like any elected official that I had worked with. He was incredibly friendly and wanted to know everything about you. That's the Vice President Joe Biden that I met.
And do you recall him having any trouble recalling your name?
Not that I recall back in 2009. Not that I recall.
So you don't remember an instance where he forgot your name or maybe somebody else's name around you?
No. I mean, I was technically on Obama's team, but I traveled with him from time to time. But I don't remember him not knowing who I was.
So when he saw you, he would say, "Hi, Karine," or "Hi, Ms. Jean-Pierre."
He would be very friendly when he saw me, and he knew what my role was, and we would just move forward in that fashion.
And you mentioned that you worked on President Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. During that campaign, did you have a similar frequency of interaction with Vice President Biden?
No, because my role was different, so no.
So you didn't see him very often?
I didn't interact with him.
Not at all?
No, because we were in Chicago. They were in the White House. He and the president were pretty busy, and so we didn't see either of them very frequently.
Did you have any role in debate preparation for either President Obama or Vice President Biden?
No. In 2024, no.
So, I guess to be clear, during the Obama administration, did you work on debate prep for anybody?
No, I did not.
And you did not in the 2024. Did you do that in the 2020?
Yes, I was.
For President Biden?
Yes. Then Vice President Biden and also then Senator Kamala Harris.
Okay, thank you. We'll get more into that later. But,
No.
So you mentioned you joined the Biden 2020 campaign around May, is that right?
Yeah, May 2020.
Did somebody approach you for this role?
It was a conversation that I had with then Vice President Biden in early of 2019. Don't remember the exact day when he had asked me to join the campaign before he announced, and I was not able to do that. I had a young child at the time and could not commit being on the road for 2 years. And so one of the things that we discussed was in the general election for me to come on board in the general election if that were to happen.
So it was a conversation directly with then Vice President?
Yeah. Yeah. And then it was revisited in May of 2020.
Was that a phone call?
No, it was a meeting
Where was the meeting?
in Virginia.
Was where specific? Was that a home or a restaurant?
If I'm remembering correctly, it was a home that the Bidens rented in Virginia in 2019 at the time.
Can you add a little color to what that meeting was?
It was pretty straightforward. It was, come join my campaign, need you on my campaign. It was very straightforward. There was nothing much more than that, being just straightforward and asking me, and direct.
Did you talk about his time served, Joe Biden's time as vice president? Did he make any reference to that?
No, it wasn't a long conversation. It was pretty direct.
Sure.
And once you joined the Biden 2020 campaign, did you travel with former Vice President Biden?
It was COVID, so there wasn't a lot of traveling. I mean, this was 2020 campaign was unprecedented, as I'm sure you all could imagine. And so it was, there wasn't a lot of travel because of COVID.
So what did your interactions with candidate Biden look like?
It was mostly virtual, to be quite honest, because of COVID.
And were these meetings, with lots of participants on the call, or did you interact directly with?
It would depend.
So occasionally you would have calls directly with candidate Joe Biden?
Like one-on-one.
How would you characterize it?
I would say that anytime they're involved information that he needed, or to prepare for a meeting, there would be a virtual conference call.
So-
I couldn't tell you how many people were on the call.
Sure. So, but you interacted with him, whether it be virtually or on the phone or maybe occasionally in person, frequently?
Well, it was COVID, so it was mostly virtual or on the phone. And I don't know, maybe I saw him a handful of times because of the moment that we were in.
So those virtual and phone calls, were they frequent?
We're talking about 2020. I mean, it was a campaign, so they were often. I can't give you the exact frequency.
And can you estimate how many times you actually interacted with then candidate Biden in person?
Probably, this is just a guess, I would say maybe less than 5 times. I mean, it was COVID, so it was really hard to engage in person.
And it's my understanding that President Biden was mostly based out of Wilmington at that time. Is that correct?
I know he was in Delaware.
Sure.
Yeah, most of the time.
And I'm not asking for an address, but just generally, where were you based at that time?
I was based in Maryland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who, to your understanding, was actually with then candidate Biden up in Delaware?
I don't know. I mean, it was a small, and again, it was COVID. It was a very, very small team of people that were around because of just trying to be careful and mindful of the protocols. And it was, as we all know, a scary time.
And then I believe you said in August of 2020, roughly, you became then candidate Kamala Harris's chief of staff. Is that right?
Yeah, the running mate. Mm-hmm.
And could you remind us what your title was? What your role was exactly?
Basically to help manage her team and to get her ready for whatever it is that she needed, whether it was a debate or a speech or making sure that she had what she needed on the road while she was traveling. But it was managing the team, essentially, what chief of staffs do.
So you did help prepare Kamala Harris for her vice presidential debates?
Yeah, I think she only had one, if I remember it correctly.
You are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you request to work for Kamala Harris over Joe Biden?
So just to give you a little bit of the lay of the land, while I was her chief of staff, I was still a senior advisor for Joe Biden. And there was once or twice where I would travel. I think I traveled with him once. I may have helped. I still was doing stuff for him, but limited capacity because I was focused on being her chief of staff. And it wasn't a choice. I didn't pick one or the other. He asked me to be the chief of staff for the running mate. I didn't know who the running mate was going to be at the time. And I when your boss asks you to do something, you say, and in that really important role, like a job like that, I said yes.
I guess I didn't realize that you had been asked to serve with the running mate before the running mate was actually chosen. Mm-hmm. How long was that kind of roughly?
I mean, here? Days. It was. Okay. It was days. That's a good question. I can't remember exactly when, but it was in a very small, short timeline.
What was your relationship with then Senator Harris like at the time?
We knew of each other, but we weren't we were friendly, but we weren't friends, and we knew of each other and respected each other.
When Senator Harris was picked as the running mate, did you think that was a good idea?
Again, this is a personal decision that only a candidate can make. So I just respected his decision and moved forward with it.
Did you think she was a suitable candidate to be vice president if so elected?
I mean, look, she was in the 2020 presidential primary. And so I thought that, I've always thought that she was impressive. I always thought that she was incredibly talented. But again, I didn't have a an opinion, it was for the president to make, or then Vice President Biden to make.
Did you find her to be honest?
I mean, I worked with her for a very short period of time. I've always found her to be direct and a hard worker. That's what I can speak to.
But not honest?
I think she was direct. I mean, honest, direct, hard worker, all of the things. I think that she was just really focused on the job at hand. That's what I can speak to.
Thank you.
And understanding this is still COVID, how often did you interact with then for the vice presidential candidate Harris?
I interacted with her. She lived in DC, so it was easier to interact with her. So I saw her often enough.
So every week?
Yeah, every week.
And now thinking into the Biden administration, of course, COVID was still around. Did your interaction with then President Biden increase from the campaign?
Yeah, say that one more time.
Once President Biden was inaugurated, of course, COVID was still around.
Oh, inauguration, yeah.
Once you were in the White House, did your interactions with President Biden increase from what it had been on the campaign trail?
So I was the principal deputy press secretary. So Jen Psaki was the press secretary. So she interacted with him a lot more than I did. But we were all, there was, well, I didn't say all of us, but there was a group of us that were at the White House. And so we were there every day.
So you would see him in person every week?
I would say a couple times a week, once a week, but again, I was the deputy, I wasn't the press secretary. So I didn't see him as regularly.
So just generally, what were your responsibilities and duties as the deputy?
To step in for Jen Psaki at the podium when she couldn't, to travel with the president, and to prep him when needed, and also to deal and talk to and manage the press.
And then when you became press secretary, is that when your interaction with President Biden increased?
Well, White House press secretary, most White House press secretary deal with the president regularly, and so did I.
So every day when he was in the White House, or?
I would say on average, once a day.
And as press secretary, did Andrew Bates report to you?
He reported to me, the communications director, and also Anita Dunn.
And how much direction did you give these people that reported to you? Were you their direct supervisors, or?
Yeah.
So you interacted with them on a daily basis as well?
With my team in the White House press, yes.
Is it usual for somebody from your team to also answer to Ms. Dunn?
It was because of his portfolio. He had a political portfolio.
Were there other members of your team that also answered to Ms. Dunn?
No, because he had a political portfolio, so yes.
What about Ian Sams?
He was not a part of my team.
Oh, okay.
Ron Klain and others have testified that there was the timing, it may not be exact, but roughly 8 a.m. senior staff meeting every day, followed by another slightly less senior staff meeting around 8:40 or so. Did you attend either or both of these every day?
I did. As press secretary, yes.
So not while you were deputy, but once you became press secretary.
Yes.
While you were deputy, did you attend the second meeting, the slightly less senior meeting?
I don't believe I did.
So understanding this is while you're press secretary, what were the usual topics of these senior staff meetings?
It was usually what was going on that day, the week ahead if needed, depending on the day, any legislative announcement, policy announcement that we were doing. It was pretty straightforward.
Were there discussions of executive decisions being made by the president?
Can you say more?
Was there discussion of the process of making an executive decision, such as issuing an executive order or a pardon or clemency decisions?
I think there were many meetings like that, but there were many meetings that I was not part of. Obviously, as White House Press Secretary, I'm not in every meeting. But usually those morning meetings were more, I would say, like a check-in meeting on the day and how to move forward.
And did these meetings ever include discussions of President Biden's health?
I think as far as I was involved, it was more of what was being asked by the press and what was the press inquiry, and it was in that form.
So if the press had questions about President Biden's health, then it would have come up at that meeting?
Not necessarily, but that would be, if you're asking me how it would come up because of the press perspective.
Do you recall that happening?
If it did, very infrequently.
Do you recall a specific instance?
No, because it didn't take over in those meetings at all.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? You didn't-
Meaning like the health, what press was asking about as it related to his health didn't overtake those meetings. You have to remember, one of the questions that I got frequently from press was health questions and age questions. So that was something that we had to deal with for a good portion of his first term or his term.
So any discussions of President Biden's health at these morning meetings, they were only in the context of press inquiries, never anything different than that?
I do not recall having a specific meeting on his health, no.
Maybe, to be clear, maybe not a meeting that's all about his health, but did his health come up at these meetings in any context?
Not that I recall.
So when you were facing media inquiries regarding the president's health, when would you raise those in a normal situation?
So I think in these meetings, I'm the White House press secretary, so if I get asked, hey, what's the press talking about? What's going to be the focus in your press briefing? That's how it would come up. So I would say, this is what the press is covering. This is the topics that they're into. That's how it would come up.
And to get answers to those questions from the press, would you raise them exclusively in that meeting,
No.
or would it be in other settings as well?
It was just as I said, this was a check-in. These meetings were primarily check-in, so it was my role is to engage with the press. And so that's how it would come up.
And if one of those questions came up and didn't feel natural, circumstances arise in which you're not bringing it up in that meeting, who would you go to get answers to that question?
And just want to step back for a second to be very clear. If there was a shooting, for example, and people were having inquiries, press was having inquiries, did he speak to the mayor? Did he speak to the governor? It was just in that same vein. I would be asked, okay, what's going on what's the incoming that you're getting? What's going on in the press? I would bring that up. So that's what I'm talking about, like what press had on their mind. As it relates to my press briefings and how I would take on any incoming questions, the Q&A, if you will, the talking points that came out would come from the comms team, senior advisors, and my press team.
So I don't think that was helpful. I don't think it entirely answers my question. Just if you had a question that you were trying to get an answer for about the president's health, who would you go to?
The press team, the comms team, senior advisors, depending on the question.
Would you go to Mike Donnellan, for instance?
So just to lay out a little bit. So the press team, people have a portfolio, comms team, people have a portfolio, and so they would be the ones that would, work with the policy teams or the senior advisor on any topics that were coming up in the briefing room, and then they would come to me, and then we would talk through whatever topics that were going to be coming up in the press briefing room, and that's how it worked.
So who had the portfolio for inquiries regarding President Biden's health?
That was primarily coming from the communications team.
And who on the communications team?
I mean, we've had different people coming through, kind of being part of the communications team. So it was an array of people. It was also Anita Dunn, who was part of the senior advisors. So I don't want to pinpoint anybody because there was, depending on the timing, depending on what time during the first term or his term.
Would it ever occur to you to go to Ms. Tomasini with a question regarding the president's health?
I did not.
How about Mr. Bernal?
About the president's health?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bernal? No.
How about Ashley Williams?
No, I don't recall doing that.
How about the First Lady? Same question.
No.
Did you interact frequently with the First Lady?
Not frequently, but I saw her from time to time.
And did you ever have a conversation about President Biden's health or fitness?
No.
How would Ms. Dunn tell you to handle inquiries regarding the president's health or fitness?
Basically meaning, can you be more specific?
If there were any talking points that stick out to you about what the message should be regarding the president's health or fitness?
I mean, I was pretty much on the record about the president's health and from my observation. Look, and what I said at the podium is certainly what I believed and what I saw myself, my personal observation as well, which is that he was, capable of doing the job. This is a president that had the experience to do the job, cared about the American people, and did it every day in and day out, and was able to have some pretty successful legislation and policies to help move this country forward. And that's how we just kept it high level. We kept it on what the president has been able to do.
Do you think that strategy, delivering that message, was effective, or do you think that there should have been other efforts taken by you or other people in the White House to push back on this story about the president's health or fitness?
Here's what I say. I would say that this is a president where the American people, reporters, whoever was following him, got to see him on a regular basis. This is someone who talked to reporters, in an informal way, taking shouted questions, inquiries from them over 670 times. So he did that pretty regularly. People got to see him multiple times a week. And that reaches a level of, hey, you guys get to see and speak to him, and he takes your question and he's out there.
Then why did this question keep coming up?
That's something for, I think, reporters to speak to. It was a question that came up. We tried to do our best to answer it. The president was out there. People got to see him. People got to hear directly from him pretty regularly. I can't speak to that. I'm not going to speak to a hypothetical that I can't even answer.
Did the frequency of this question increase as from January 20th, 2021 to the end of Joe Biden's term?
I think it was something that was a part of being in the administration. It came up. I can't speak to the frequency, but it was one of the topics that came up often.
It didn't increase after his debate with President Trump?
I mean, you all watch my press briefings, right? So that was a topic certainly after the debate. But again, that my observation has always been, when it comes to this President Biden, that he was more than competent of doing the job each and every day in and day out. And I got to see that on a regular basis. That was my observation.
And I hear what you're saying. I'm less interested in what you have to say about whether you believe the president was capable of doing the job. My question is, did you ever see a change in the president's ability to do the job?
We started off part of your questioning about when I first met him in 2009. I think that he's aged, I've aged. Presidents age in these jobs. It is very common. Obviously, he got older. I spoke to that at the podium. He spoke to that about how he's aged. But when it comes to competency, when it comes to being able to do the job, he was more than capable of doing that. Did he age? We all do. Yes, he did.
And I understand that we all age. We're aging just sitting in this room right now, but
Every second.
every second. But
Feels like it.
My question is, did you see a change from in his competency? You brought the word competency from 2021 to 2025.
I did not see a change in his competency from 2021 to the end of his administration, if that's what you're asking me,
So
if I have that correct.
yes, ma'am. So let's expand the scope even further. You've known Joe Biden, interacted with Joe Biden since on a semi-regular basis since 2009. Is it your testimony here today that Joe Biden's competency is the same from 2009 to today?
What I will say is, when I served with him in the 4 years of this administration, he was more than competent to do the job. This is someone who woke up every morning focused on the American people and delivering for the American people, and that's what I saw. I saw someone who cared and did that in a very focused way, and you know, that's why I was honored and privileged to have worked in this administration.
And I understand that you believe that he was competent the entirety of his term. I'm asking you, did you see a change in from 2009 to 2025 in Joe Biden's competency?
No, I did not. This is someone who, if you're in a room with him, when I was in a room with him during the administration, when I came in to talk to him about whatever issue that he wanted to know about, this is someone who had a conversation with me back and forth, who was very engaged, who was very aware of what was happening in the press, sometimes more aware than I was, and we would have that discussion. And that was my exchange, and that was what I experienced in the 4 years that I worked for this president.
Do you believe that Joe Biden became a less adept debater from the time that you began knowing him to 2025?
So I will just use his own words. He said himself he wasn't as good debater as he used to be, or he wasn't speaking as well as he used to. That's something that he said. He actually spoke to.
Did you ever have conversations with President Biden about why he wasn't as good of a speaker as he used to be?
I never had a direct conversation with the president about that.
Did you have a conversation with somebody else about that?
I never had a conversation with anybody about that.
You mentioned that you didn't recall, at least, noticing that Joe Biden had a stutter when you first met him. But did you notice it at some point during your time in the Biden administration?
I can't remember specific times, but obviously this is something that he was free-willing and talked about extensively, and I can't pinpoint a moment where I experienced that or could remember, but this is somebody who talked about it, connected with other folks who had stutters, and you know, again, if you have a stutter, doesn't mean that you can't perform at a high level.
Certainly, and the reason I ask it all is simply because that the fact that he had a stutter was brought up as perhaps a reason for some of his lack of performance in the debate, for example, and other moments. Do you agree with that? Do you think that played a role?
Look, I can't hypothesize or opine what it's like to have a stutter, and what that's not something that I can speak to. I know what you're speaking of. What I know is that he had to work very hard to deal with his stutter, even today, from the time he was young, even today, something that he talked about extensively. Again, just because you have a stutter doesn't mean you can't operate at a high level and be very functioning, and that does not affect your competency.
Certainly, and I agree with you. I only mean that it seemed to be cited as proof that he was not in cognitive decline in any way, that any verbal stumble was simply the result of the stutter.
Again, what I can speak to is my observation, and this is somebody that was more than competent to do his job. I don't think a stutter, if he had it or not, if you have a stutter, doesn't mean that you can't perform at a high level. But my experience, my observation, again, and I said this at the podium, and I will continue to say it today in front of all of you, which is this is someone who was very active and engaging with me when I had conversations with him.
Do you think that you mentioned that the press was very concerned or brought up frequently President Biden's health or these related issues of his cognitive abilities or fitness to serve? Do you think the American people were also concerned about that?
I can't speak for the whole entire American people. It's not something I can speak to.
Did you ever have outreach from friends or people you knew that were concerned that President Biden was struggling with his health or cognitive abilities?
Not that I recall, not specific conversations.
Did you ever have a conversation with anyone in the White House?
In the White House?
Where you or they were concerned about President Biden's health or cognitive abilities?
I've never spoken to anybody in the White House about that.
To be clear, you've spoken to people in the White House about that regarding press inquiries, though.
Exactly, but the question was, right, if I heard the question, if people in the White House were concerned, like personally concerned. I did not talk to anybody about that in the White House, about personal concern.
Sure, and you would, I'm not a press person, I don't really know how your job works, but it's my understanding.
You should try it, it's fun.
That if you were receiving outreach from the press about the president's health or ability to serve, you would go to either the comms team, the press team.
So it's not necessarily that I would go. Everybody was watching the news just as I was, right? So people were aware with what was happening in the news. But as the press secretary, when I'm in these meetings, these check-in meetings, I would bring up, hey, this is what I'm going to get in the briefing room. This is, what the incoming that we're having that's coming in from the White House press corps.
Sure, and over the course of your 2 years as press secretary, it's your testimony here today that you never just asked somebody, whether it was one of the senior advisors or the vice president, hey, Steve Ricchetti, is the president okay?
I never had to ask that question because I saw the president on a daily basis, and I never ever thought I never had that question.
Right. But to be clear, you're not a doctor, correct?
I'm not a doctor, but you're also asking me to make a statement, right, about his health. So, it goes both ways here. I'm just telling you my observation, right? My observation was this was somebody who was competent. And these are conversations that I'm having, right? These are direct conversations that I'm having with the President of the United States, Joe Biden at the time. And it was always direct. It was always very alert. And, it was a healthy back and forth. So because I had that daily access to him and talk to him, there would be no reason for me to go to a senior advisor to ask the question that you just asked me.
And just to be specific, after the 2024 debate, you never thought maybe I should actually ask a few other people if the president's doing okay?
He said he had a bad night. The president said he had a bad night.
And you never thought to ask why?
Again, this is somebody that I had regular engagement with, and I never had a concern about anything that dealt with if the president could do his job or not. I saw a president that was more than capable to do his job.
So I understand you had frequent interaction with President Biden, but for those in the White House that didn't, were you aware of any of them coming to you or to anyone else?
They did not come to me.
Are you aware of anybody raising concerns about President Biden's health with another senior advisor?
No, I was not.
So as far as you know, the White House, nobody in the White House had concerns about the president's ability to do his job.
I'm one person out of hundreds of people that work for the President of the United States. I could only speak for myself and my observation and my engagement with people. That's all that I'm speaking to today.
But you were the spokesperson for the White House, so I would think that you might have an ear for what people in the White House were doing or saying. And did nobody ever come to you with any concern and say, Ms. Jean-Pierre, is the president okay?
No one came to me and said those exact words. That's not a conversation that I had with anyone. What I can say is that my observation, again, I'm one person, and my job was to share information that in a transparent way that reporters and the American people needed to know. I did not have those very direct, you're talking about very direct conversations with people, and I didn't have them.
Do you think you shared information, that the White House shared information directly and clearly regarding the president's health or ability to do the job?
Yes.
We're getting close to the end of our hour, but just quickly, Ian Sams testified that, and I don't want to misrepresent the exact number of times, but that he did not interact with President Biden very often in person. And he was certainly asked to make statements, particularly in the context of the Robert Hur report, pushing back against the concerns about President Biden's, I think in that case, primarily memory. Did Ian Sams come to you to discuss how to respond to those concerns?
Come to me to help him how to respond to those concerns?
Are you aware of how Ian Sams got his direction for how to respond to these concerns, since he did not interact with President Biden very often?
Ian Sams didn't work for me. He didn't report to me,
right.
So I would not have been involved in how he engaged or interacted with the press in his job, because he wasn't under my tutelage, if you will. He didn't work for me. I wasn't his direct report.
So you have no knowledge of how his response to questions in the context of the Hur report would have been made or considered?
That was not that would not be my role with how Ian would go and speak to the press about. I just wasn't involved in that.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
I've never really understood why Ian Sams was brought on. He said he didn't interact with the president. You say you didn't interact with him. Who was telling Ian Sams what to do and what to say when he would go out there? It seemed like on a daily basis.
So just to correct, I interacted with Ian.
You didn't give. He didn't give orders.
I didn't want that to be on the record. I interacted with Ian because he did have a portfolio, and so we definitely interacted on his portfolio. I did not give him direction on how to do his job because he didn't report to me. My understanding, because I was not involved in his hiring, I wasn't part of that. My understanding is that he reported to the White House Counsel because that's where he was based, and also Anita Dunn, who was a senior advisor at the time. That's my understanding.
It seems like you seem like you did a very good job for President Biden. And I don't understand why they would bring Ian Sams on. And
I can't speak to it. I honestly
And you
can't
think
speak
he
to him.
reported to the council, but, I mean, are you sure?
I mean,
Like, somebody had to tell him what to say when he was there.
yeah, that's
He said
where.
a lot about me, which doesn't have anything to do with this, but a lot about the president's
Yeah.
health.
Yeah.
And then to come to find out, he never talked to the president.
Well, he was, I believe his title was spokesperson that was in the White House Counsel, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm sure your team will correct me. That's where he was based, and that's where he kind of lived in doing his job. I can't speak beyond that, but I understand your question. I don't have much to share. I appreciate the question, though.
Thank you. We'll go off the record.
Jean-Pierre, I understand you have a statement you wanted to read. We'll give you some time.
Yes, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I guess it's, I don't know, is it afternoon or it's still morning? Okay.
Still morning.
Good morning. I have been willing to voluntarily cooperate with the committee from the time I received your request. I'm here today to answer your questions about my service in the Biden administration that are within the scope of our inquiry. I have fulfilled my obligations to the committee by appearing before you today as requested in your letter dated June 27th, 2025. I served as the 35th White House Press Secretary, becoming the first Black person, immigrant, and openly queer person to serve in that role. I was the longest serving female press secretary in my role, first as Principal Deputy Press Secretary and then as Press Secretary. My job was to relay information from all corners of the executive branch to the press and to the American people. I served in the Biden-Harris administration from day one through its end. During this time, my focus was on the administration's countless administrative and legislative accomplishments. Transparency was one of my priorities, and I believe the Biden-Harris administration shared that priority. In furtherance of this priority, I conducted 306 formal press briefings and hundreds of gaggles. In each of those interactions, I answered questions with the information I had at the time. I will be clear today. At all times during President Biden's presidency, I believed that he was fully capable of exercising his presidential duties and responsibilities. That is not to say that he was infallible. No one is. Like any person, including presidents, President Biden made mistakes and had bad days. And like any person, including presidents, President Biden physically aged over the years. There was never a moment when I doubted his abilities or judgment. I can, of course, only speak for my own observations. I have traveled with and saw the president often, but I was not party to every conversation that occurred in the administration. I had an important and visible role in the administration, but my role was only one of many important roles throughout the executive branch. I'm honored to have had the privilege of serving the president and the American people. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Ms. Jean-Pierre. You, as press secretary, you were a principal deputy press secretary at the beginning of the administration, and as press secretary, I think you told my colleagues you saw the president about once a day.
Yeah, on average.
Once a day, and you traveled with him quite frequently and just so we have a clear record, was it ever your view that President Biden was unable to make decisions about the matters within the scope of his presidential duties?
No.
Was it ever your view that President Biden was unable to fully execute the duties of his office?
No.
And did you ever have any concerns about President Biden's ability to handle significant policy matters?
No.
And my majority colleagues have alleged the existence of a cover-up with respect to President Biden's mental acuity. Also, in the interest of making sure we have a clear record, Ms. Jean-Pierre, you have no knowledge that Joe Biden was at any point in time mentally unable to execute the duties of his office as president, correct?
Correct.
And to your knowledge, did anyone in the White House at any point during Joe Biden's presidency ever make decisions to issue any form of clemency, pardons or otherwise in Joe Biden's name without his knowledge or authorization?
No.
And did you ever make decisions to issue any form of clemency, pardons, or otherwise in Joe Biden's name without his knowledge or authorization?
No.
And again, at any point during the Biden presidency, did anyone in the White House, to your knowledge, ever issue any other type of an executive order without President Biden's knowledge or authorization?
To my knowledge, no.
So to your knowledge, all decisions to issue executive orders during the Biden administration were made by President Biden alone,
Yes, to my knowledge.
and no one exercised the power on his behalf.
To my knowledge, no.
And lastly, apart from the instances in which President Biden delegated authority to Vice President Harris while he was undergoing a medical procedure, did anyone, to your knowledge, ever step in to carry out the duties of the presidency in Joe Biden's place because he was unable to do so?
No.
Thank you.
Great, we'll go off record. Just as a general question, have you discussed this interview today with anyone besides your immediate family and your counsel?
No.
I think you mentioned that you have spoken with former President Biden since he left office. Is that right?
Yes.
On more than one occasion, or was it one time?
To my knowledge, it was one time. No, it was one time. It was a couple times over a week period.
Okay. When was that?
It was early May.
And in your conversations in early May with former President Biden, what did you discuss?
I was talking to him about an interview that he was about to do. So it was a prep, if you will.
And anything related to this investigation?
Not to my knowledge.
So you,
What was the interview about?
It was the View interview. I think you all probably watched it. I was part of a team that prepped him for it.
So just to be clear, you had no conversations with former President Biden about the contents of your testimony today or what you would testify to?
No.
And just one of your former questions, Peter. I believe, and I don't have the transcript in front of me, I believe Mr. Bates told us that you had that while you were having a phone conversation that this investigation came up with. And do you remember that?
I'm sorry, can you just explain that a little? I want to make sure we're tracking the question.
Sure.
Who's having the conversation with who?
Sure. When we had an interview with Andrew Bates, I believe he told us that there was a phone conversation in which that this came up in passing. Is that correct?
So I know what you're talking about. It was probably the day that we both got the letter, and I think it was one of those "Are you okay?" conversations, and then we both decided on that call that we should not be moving forward to not talk to each other.
Understood.
Yeah.
Any similar conversations?
No.
Thank you.
No.
And during that conversation with Mr. Bates, did you have any conversation of what topics might be brought up in these interviews?
No. It was, "Are you okay?" Checking in on you. Okay, that's it. We don't need to talk anymore.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Listening to your statement that you just read, I think you made reference to President Biden having bad days. Do I have that correct?
Correct.
How did you know President Biden was having a bad day?
I was speaking in generalities, right? Not everybody, we're not perfect. We have good days and bad days, so I was speaking in general.
Did anybody ever inform you, the president's having a bad day today?
Not that I recall, not specifically in that way.
Well, what do you consider a bad day?
I mean, I'm speaking for myself, right? Not for anybody else.
Sure, let's start with what you consider.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have bad days, right? You don't feel like, at least for me, right, as White House press secretary, maybe I came off the podium and I was like, oh, that didn't feel good, right?
Sure.
Or I felt like I could have been, more sharp or whatever. Like we critique ourselves very harshly, and I think in that regard. And it's big to us, but sometimes it's small to others, right? So.
Are you aware of anybody ever instructing either President Biden or a member of staff at the White House that maybe the president shouldn't do something because he's having a bad day?
No.
Thank you.
On March 26th, 2022, soon after Russia invaded Ukraine, President Biden spoke in Warsaw, Poland, and he said, quote, "For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power," with regard to Vladimir Putin. I think this is March 26th, 2022, is shortly before you became press secretary. Is that right? You were deputy still at that time?
Can you say that again? I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to.
Sure. This is a quote from President Biden from March 26th, 2022. So I'm just stating for the record, I believe you started as press secretary on May 13th.
Oh.
So shortly after that. So during this time that this was said, you were deputy. Is that correct?
Yes, if you're talking about March 2022, yes.
So I can read the quote again if you'd like. But
do you mind?
Sure. President Biden stated, quote, "For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power," end quote, with regard to Vladimir Putin. Do you recall that?
Not specifically. It vaguely sounds familiar.
Okay. So do you recall what the White House said after that statement was made?
I wasn't the press secretary at the time, so I don't recall.
Okay. Do you believe that President Biden meant to say what he was saying when he appeared to call for President Putin to be ousted?
Look, I don't specifically remember that moment, and so I did not have a conversation with him directly because I was not the press secretary at the time.
Sure.
I can't speak to, I can't characterize what the president was meant.
But you were principal deputy press secretary,
Yeah.
correct? So when something like this would come up, was that not the deputy press secretary or the other people in the office? Did they not handle things like this?
I think what I'm trying to say is I wasn't the press secretary at the time, so this would have been something that I don't directly remember, and so I can't speak to how that played out. I mean, I said earlier that as deputy press secretary, I didn't see him as often, so this would be something that my predecessor would have handled directly and would be able to speak to.
Well, I believe that statement was walked back slightly in the aftermath, and so would something like that be what you mean by a bad day, for instance?
Look, I think what I can say is, and you guys heard it, right? People have bad days. Nobody's perfect, even presidents in my statement, right? Like all of us. And my observation, more broadly, continues to be that he was still very much competent to do the job. And again, that's why I wanted to be really clear that we all have bad days, we all have missteps, and we're not perfect.
Maybe it's helpful if we talk about some other examples when you were press secretary. So this is on May 23rd, 2022. So just for the record, that was after you became press secretary, is that right?
Yes, for the record, yes.
So speaking alongside Japanese Prime Minister Kishida in Tokyo, President Biden was asked, quote, "Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?" And President Biden responded, "Yes." The reporter responded, surprised, "You are?" And President Biden stated, "That's the commitment we made." Do you recall that interaction?
Yeah, I recall.
Were you surprised by President Biden's statement in that moment?
In that moment, I can't speak to what I was thinking in that moment.
Did that statement appear to be at odds with what you understood to be President Biden or America's policy toward Taiwan?
From where our policy was, yes.
I'm sorry, could you be more specific?
Well, I was answering your question. Where our policy was it at odds, yes.
Were you consulted in, or were you involved in the handling of the aftermath of that?
Yes.
Did you advise President Biden on how to handle that issue going forward?
I think we all talked through with him about the statement. I want to be really clear. I can't specifically remember the conversation, but I was certainly part of the conversation, yes.
Sure. Did President Biden explain how the mix-up, if it was a mix-up, how it happened, why it happened?
Honestly, I can't recall the specifics of the conversation on how he explained it.
Do you believe President Biden knew what he was saying when he said it? Or did he misspeak?
Look, I think that we had a conversation about it. I cannot recall specifically how it went back and forth. And so it's hard for me to characterize that today.
I think in your opening statement, you said something along the lines of, you never had a moment where you doubted President Biden's judgment. And this instance of seemingly forgetting about strategic ambiguity with regard to Taiwan, that wouldn't stand out to you as an instance where his judgment was at question?
The president was in the job for 4 years, and I think his record shows that he made critical, important decision that mattered to the American people, whether domestically or foreign. We're talking about 2 moments, I think, you just laid out to me. And he had 37 press conferences during his time, and that does not take away from believing that this was a president that was indeed competent to lead and to move this country forward.
Sure. I understand that you've been very clear, I think, on that, but I don't mean to split hairs. You just said that there was never a moment where you doubted his judgment.
That continues to be true.
So in that moment where he appeared to forget or reject strategic ambiguity, you had no concerns about his judgment.
I wouldn't use that moment as an only time or a moment that would make me question anything about his competency. That does not change my statement. Okay.
Well, a third example, on June 20th, 2023, again, that being while you were White House press secretary, is that correct?
Yep. Yep.
President Biden attended a fundraiser with Governor Gavin Newsom in California. During the fundraiser, President Biden called Chinese President Xi Jinping a dictator. I guess similar questions. Do you recall that instance?
Yes.
Were you surprised when President Biden said that?
I don't remember my initial reaction, but I do recall.
So I guess similarly then, did that statement appear to be at odds with the White House's general stance on China or President Xi Jinping?
Yes.
Do you believe that President Biden meant to say that when he said it?
What I will continue to believe is that this president was more than competent to lead and move this country forward. I can't get into characterizing or explaining for the president in that moment what he was thinking.
I guess the reason these examples stick out to me is in the course of our interviews and certainly my knowledge of President Biden's career, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, his expertise in foreign policy is something that many of the witnesses have brought up, even as something that distracted him at times from being sharp on domestic issues. And so these missteps appear. Do you not think that they're a reflection of his waning abilities?
I think that presidents, I don't think it's just Joe Biden. Presidents have had misspeaks, missteps. I think I said that in my opening statements. This is not a specific to one president. I think that we can go back and look at other presidents who have had similar situations. I think when it comes to his competency, when it comes to again, getting things done when I was there in the 4 years for the American people, doing some historic policies, moving forward some historic policies and legislation. It would not have happened if it wasn't for this president's experience. It would not have happened if it wasn't for his leadership. And again, I mean, it goes back to what I said in my statement, that we are not perfect.
I guess I won't belabor the point, but certainly, as you mentioned, President Biden, made an uncountable number of statements and over the course of his presidency, and certainly, all presidents are bound to have a misstep here or there. And the reason that these and maybe some others we will bring up today stand out to me is because they do appear to be something that President Biden, operating at full capacity, would not have gotten wrong. You don't see it that way?
No, I don't. I think, again, in my statement, I mentioned presidents with an S. That is very much something that happens with presidents, with all of us from time to time. But in those 4 years that I worked with him, he was able to accomplish a lot, and he was more than capable of doing the job and got things done in those 4 years. And we used to say this all the time, that most presidents couldn't get done in their first two terms. In their 2 terms.
When you were, I understand what you're saying about missteps. I make them all the time. When you were debriefing or talking with President Biden about how to handle any kind of fallout from these rather significant missteps in terms of what American foreign policy was, you were talking with him. How would he respond?
What I can remember, he took it in. He took it in, he listened, and that's what I could remember specifics or the details of, is like he just took it in.
Did he ever say, no, I said what I said, or, to the effect of, I said what I said and I meant it?
I don't remember those interactions specifically, but I know anytime that I would bring something up or I would say this is what the press is saying, most of the time he would just take it in and listen.
Did you ever see President Biden yell in response to somebody trying to clean up something that he had said?
Not that I recall.
Did you ever see President Biden yell?
Not that I recall specifically.
And so, to be clear, you don't recall in any of those instances those 3 instances that I just discussed with you, you don't recall President Biden expressing regret about what he had said?
I don't remember the specific conversation. That's what I can share with you.
Did he ever say, when a plan was presented to clean up what had been said or clarify what he meant, did he, approve that kind of cleanup?
Normally, if it's coming from him, he would approve it, yes.
What if it were coming from someone else?
No, meaning like if we would flag something like that to him, again, you're asking me for granular details of the back and forth that I can't remember the granular, but I can speak to the process, and he would sign off on that.
So just for clarity's sake, you're talking generally about the process. how it
Generally
typically
about the
works.
process,
Okay.
if there was
Thank you.
something that we wanted to make sure he was comfortable with, and us saying yes. In general, the process was that.
Were there deviations from that general process?
Not that I recall.
And with those missteps, did you see those, going back to your entire time knowing Joe Biden, did you see those increase as he aged?
I can't speak to frequency or the amount of if it increased. I just know that we all have them and it happens. But I can't, as I said this before. Did he get older? Yes. Did he age? Yes. And he would say this. I mean, he said many times about him getting older and not speaking as well and not walking as well. This is something coming directly from him. So he acknowledged that he aged. I can't speak to the frequency
I
of
understand.
change.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And I understand getting older, and I understand that, walking slower is part of getting older. But you've lumped that in, President Biden lumped that in with speaking as well. And that raises different issues, I believe. Don't you think so?
I'm not a medical expert, so I can't speak to that.
Well, okay. Fair. Did you notice from your entire time knowing him that his speaking deteriorated?
What I will say is, his age, he definitely aged. We all make missteps. We all have bad days. Did he have some? Obviously, I said that at the top, that he did. I was not tracking everything that happened every day. So I can't speak to frequency. I'm not an expert, so I can't really speak to that.
So you think President Biden's speaking ability today or in 2024 is the same as when you first met him in 2009?
Obviously, it's not.
What about it changed?
I can't speak to specifics, but I mean, 2009 to 2024 is a lot of time has lapsed. All of us change. All of us age.
It's been reported that, again, we don't have the book. We will certainly be reading the book. Vice President, yours as well, but Vice President.
I thought you were talking about mine. I'm like, great.
Vice President Harris's book is reported to have reports to say, at 81, Joe got tired. That's when his age showed in physical and verbal stumbles. Do you agree with that?
I did not. I haven't read the book. I did not read the excerpt. I can't speak to it.
Okay, well, let's take out the fact that it's an excerpt from a book. Do you agree with Joe got tired? That's when his age showed in physical and verbal stumbles.
That's not my observation. My observation that this was somebody who was always running around and doing things on behalf of the American people, whether that's traveling, whether that's speaking in front of the American people at the White House and talking about talking about policies or what it is that we're doing for the American people. That is not my experience.
Who saw President Biden more, do you think, between you and Vice President Harris?
I believe I did, because I traveled with him and saw him every day.
So it's our understanding that you would oftentimes have a big binder or book of talking points. Is that right?
It is not unusual for a White House press secretary to have a binder.
Sure, but I've never been the White House press secretary, so what
Yeah.
usually is included in a binder like that?
Well, that's
and who prepares it?
Yeah, that's why I was sharing. It's not unusual for a White House press secretary to have a binder. It is a collective process.
So by people from your team as well as people from outside of your team, is that right?
People from my team and people outside of my team.
And this would include talking points mainly for you to answer questions at the podium from reporters, or other types of talking points as well, or?
It's the binder the purpose of the binder is to have points in the book to address many topics, domestic, foreign topics primarily.
Were there ever talking points in your book related to President Biden's health, cognitive abilities, mental acuity, kind of all of those sorts of related topics?
Yes, because it was questions that the press was asking.
Do you recall what the general theme of those talking points was?
I mean, I did press briefings, so I think what I said is out there on the record about answering those specific questions to the press.
So your public statements reflect exactly what generally would have been put in those binders?
Yes.
And just to clarify, because the question was a slightly convoluted.
Sure.
And I don't mean that in a critical way.
Sure.
You said exactly generally reflect. I just want to make clear that I think the answer was probably generally reflects what was in the book.
Yeah, I apologize. Thank you.
No. Appreciate it. Thank you.
No judgment on binders. We're using binders.
As I could see from here.
So did you read the binder? Like, what do you do? It's a huge binder. You read the binder every night beforehand?
Just want to make sure this is clear. Like every other White House press secretary, we have binders, notes, whatever you want to call it, because we want to make sure that we are accurate in pushing information out to the American public. And so that's why that exists. As far as my process, I read the binder pretty regularly. I focused on it pretty regularly because that was my job to do so.
And who would prepare talking points regarding President Biden's health for the binder? It depended on if it was certainly any memo or anything like that came out from the doctor. It would certainly have his involvement. And outside of that, it was senior advisors and the communications team. Do you think Anita Dunn played a role in that in preparation with bullets or memos regarding the president's health?
I can't speak to what she did specifically on anything, memos or anything like that. I can't speak specifically, but she certainly was part of the senior advisors that that my team would speak to about certain issues.
And when you make reference to the doctor, you're speaking about Dr. Kevin O'Connor?
Yes.
And his team, presumably?
It was primarily him directly.
How often would you interact with Dr. O'Connor?
Not often. He would travel. When he traveled with the president, I would certainly interact and see him.
And I assume that when the president's annual health report would come out, you would speak more regularly or in the run-up to that with Dr. O'Connor?
Not in the run-up, mostly afterwards.
And my question was ambiguous. The afterwards meaning after you had gone and spoken in front of the press, or afterwards after his examination? Yeah,
to be clear, I was not involved in the memo process that Dr. O'Connor did. I had no involvement in that. My team and I would put that out there. Whenever the memo was ready, it came to my team and we would share it with the American public. And the times that I engaged with him was usually when there were additional press inquiries or they wanted to understand something better or wanted more clarity in the memo. And that's when somebody from my team would go to him directly just to ask for clarity.
Did Dr. O'Connor ever instruct you or advise you not to mention something?
No.
On the book, the binder of talking points, I think you said various people at various times would contribute to this binder or book. Was there one person who was ultimately responsible for putting it together? Was that you?
Like putting the book together? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, there's usually a junior person that's in charge of making sure everything is in the book, but I was responsible for it ultimately.
So if there were a talking point about President Biden's health or fitness in the book, would it be denoted in some way who that came from?
Meaning, can you say more?
So if you were getting a question from the press about President Biden's health and you looked in your book and there was a talking point, a suggested talking point on that topic, was it denoted in some way who had prepared that talking point, or how would you know who had prepared that talking point?
So nowhere in the book did that exist.
So in general then, how would you know who had prepared a specific talking point?
It depended. I think I explained before that people had portfolios, and so usually a policy or topic or issue was in someone's portfolio, and so they owned that portfolio, and so they would be. That's how I would know where it came from.
And just, I can't remember, and I don't have the transcript in front of me, what you just said, what you said last hour. You do not remember whose portfolio was President Biden's health. Is that correct?
That usually came from senior advisors in the communications team, and my team. I mean, it was coming from various places, but usually senior advisors were kind of in charge, and that would primarily be Anita Dunn.
What other issues besides President Biden's health were dealt with at the senior advisors level exclusively?
There were a lot of issues. It wasn't just that. You're asking me about the health, but there were a lot of issues. Like if we're announcing, for example, an important policy or legislation, talking to Congress about certain things, that would certainly be at the senior advisor level. So they handled an array of things that we wanted to make sure that they got signed off on.
Is it fair to say that if a particular issue were being handled by the senior advisors, that it was an issue that was significant?
I wouldn't necessarily say that because it was an array of things. Again, talking to leadership, or an important issue that was announcement of a legislation or a policy.
But those sound significant.
They sound significant, but I don't want to limit it to that. It could be. I mean, things could rise to that level in any issue.
We'll talk a little bit more about her report, I think, at some point, but so just briefly, and I want to separate, I think the her report issue there's kind of two separate issues. So taking the president's memory and the related concerns raised by special counsel Her on that topic, who would have provided talking points about that for the briefing?
That came from Ian and the White House counsel team and Anita Dunn.
So the statement that Ian Sams made, and I believe you may have used this word as well. I don't have it in front of me, so feel free to correct me and we can check as well. But the term gratuitous was brought up a number of times. Was that something that originated with Ian Sams?
That originated from that side of things, yeah. Ian, Anita, and that team, yes.
And just, sorry, for clarity's sake, are you saying it is specifically your recollection that it was Ian, or it was that team of people?
My specific recollection, to be more clear, it came from that group of people. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know who decided on that word. I can't speak to that.
Sure, but generally it would be Ian Sams who would handle providing talking points out of that office to you?
Yes.
Did you ever, was there ever an instance where you had to go and follow up with Ian Sams about one of those talking points?
Not that I recall.
So not on the Her report?
Not that I recall. Did we have conversations? Did we go back and forth? Yes.
And then just quickly on the process of compiling the binder, I know you said various people, including yourself, would put talking points in it. Was there a final review of everything that was added to the binder?
Yeah, from the communications team.
And just the communications team or any other?
Sometimes they would pull in senior advisors, and there's also policy folks as well that would be involved. Sometimes folks from the different agencies would be involved as well, so if it's an issue that's coming from that agency. But the communications team was the primary because they deal with the messaging.
And did President Biden ever review the binder talking points?
What was in my binder? Not that I recall.
At a press briefing on July 2nd, 2024, a reporter stated, quote, "The administration strongly criticized the media for clips showing the president appearing to be confused, freezing at times. You called it cheap fakes, misinformation, disinformation, and in one case implied that it was the product of artificial intelligence, calling it deep fakes. Do you have any regret over using that language?" End quote. You responded, quote, "No, not at all. And let me be clear, it was a certain part of the media." End quote. Was the term cheap fakes something that was put into the binder?
Meaning,
When you used the term cheap fakes, was that your choice of words in the moment, or was that something that had been prepared ahead of time as a talking
it
point?
was prepared.
Do you know who prepared that?
It came from, again, various offices, departments, in creating the talking points for that particular issue.
Sure, but to be more specific, who would generally handle?
I don't recall. If you're asking me where that came from specifically, I just don't recall.
And did you or did anyone ever verify if the videos you were talking about were in fact cheap fakes?
I believe so.
What is a cheap fake? I really don't know.
It was something that we did not coin. It was something that the media coined. They did the work. They did the legwork on coming up with that terminology, and so we were just elevating essentially what the media was saying, what the press was saying.
So do you know what it is?
I mean, it basically is laid out with how you defined it with what President Biden was actually doing, and it took away from what he was actually doing or created an illusion of something that just did not exist, but using him. And so that is what we were calling out. And the press was calling it out too. We were just elevating it in the briefing room.
But were all clips circulated on social media or otherwise showing President Biden being confused or freezing at times, were those all fakes?
I can't speak to everything that was on social media.
Sure, but there were instances where videos were circulated of President Biden appearing confused or freezing for a moment that were real, correct?
Not that I recall. What we were trying to lift up was something that was very, very clear that what they were showing was not actually what was happening.
Did you ever see President Biden appear confused?
No.
What about during the debate performance? Did he not appear confused to you there?
He, during the debate performance, he seemingly to me looked like he had a cold. And that's what he said. And from someone who saw him every day, that's what I saw. Someone who had a cold, who was hoarse, and that is something that he said that he had.
So when he said, "We finally beat Medicare," that's indicative of a cold to you?
I think he was sick. I can't speak to what he was thinking at the time. He said it was a bad night. He said it was a bad performance.
Is it fair to say, though, that it was reported in the press after the debate that President Biden appeared to be confused when he delivered that line about beating Medicare?
I mean, I can't characterize what the president was feeling or thinking.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah, no, I hear.
Regardless of whether you think he was confused, do you think that the American people thought that he was confused in that moment?
I think it was a bad debate, and he said it was a bad debate.
Well,
And I think it was indeed a misstep. I do think it was a misstep. And that's what it looked like, and that's what he said, that it was a bad debate.
Well, and the reason, I don't mean to split hairs, the reason I'm asking, I think this question that was raised to you at this press briefing was very shortly after the debate. And so the way I read that is, were all of the clips of President so this is my question, were all of the clips being circulated of President Biden where he appeared to be confused, they weren't all cheap fakes, were they?
You're asking me to speak to a hypothetical that I can't answer. I don't know all of the videos or tapes that are out there. I just can't answer that. I can't speak to that.
And so you don't think that your characterization of these videos as being cheap fakes may have been misleading to people who are seeing clips from the debate where President Biden, in my opinion, appeared to be confused? You don't think that that was a confusing statement?
I think you're bringing a bunch of things together. Don't believe that that's what I was doing, misleading the American people. I was lifting up something that the press themselves talked about and laid out. And we were really just making that clear as well to the American people, something that the press talked about in those particular moments. And we were speaking about specific videos.
So there were specific videos that you were referring to with cheap fakes?
There were specific videos that the press was referring to cheap fakes, and that's what we were lifting up.
Did you ever clarify the specific videos that you meant when you called them cheap fakes?
I mean, I don't recall. I mean, I think at the time it was very clear to the press what I was talking about. I don't think there was confusion in the press room at the time about what we were talking about because it was all over the news. It was being reported on pretty heavily.
Yeah, go ahead.
So switching gears a little bit, neurologist Dr. Kevin Kennard visited the executive mansion 8 times in 8 months between 2023 and 2024. Do you recall these visits?
I mean, I know that it was reported on.
Do you know what prompted those visits?
I believe there was a statement that was put out by Dr. O'Connor explaining. So I would have to refer you to that statement.
So at the time, your only knowledge of Dr. Kennard's visits would have been the publicly available memo from
At the time, I think it was reported by the press first, and then there was a supplemental memo that came out from Dr. O'Connor.
So you recall that memo?
The supplemental memo?
Yes.
I recall the supplemental memo being released to explain Dr. Kennard's visits.
And then at a press briefing on July 8th, 2024, you cited, quote, security reasons, end quote, when refusing to explain the details of the neurologist visits. You never said what those security concerns were.
I believe the supplemental memo spoke to Dr. Kennard's visits, and I would refer you to that.
Had you ever heard the name Dr. Kennard before this was reported on?
Not that I recall.
Did you ever hear about a neurologist visiting the White House prior to this being reported on?
Not that I recall. As you know, as it's connected to his physical, he sees an array of specialists, but I would have to say no. I don't know any visits from Dr. Kennard
And
beyond learning this.
And did you received questions, correct, about the president participating or somehow completing a cognitive exam? You received those questions, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever know of the president, in fact, taking a cognitive exam?
Not that I'm aware of.
Are you aware of anybody in the White House advising that the president take a cognitive exam?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you ever say, like, it would make my job easier if he just took the cognitive exam?
It's not my decision to make.
Is it, I really don't know, would it have been inappropriate to say, like, this would make my job easier if he just took the cognitive exam?
I think that's up to the medical doctor
In her interview, Anita Dunn explained that some of Biden's senior advisors came to a consensus that Biden shouldn't take the cognitive exam, concluding that it would offer no political benefits. Were you aware of those discussions, or?
I don't recall. And I've said this earlier, as the White House press secretary, I'm not in every meeting, right? It's not my job to be in every meeting. There's some conversations that are going to happen that I'm not involved in, that I'm not included in.
So you don't recall being aware that the reason that President Biden wasn't taking a cognitive test was that it had been deemed that it would offer no political benefits?
And I will also say that I wasn't part of kind of political strategy, because that was not part of my portfolio. And that was something that I was not, as a White House press secretary, was not capable of doing, or was part of my purview.
And when you said, to my previous question, that you believed that it was up to the doctor for the president to take a cognitive exam, that was, you're referring to Dr. Kevin O'Connor again?
Yeah, he was the president's doctor, so I was referring to Dr. O'Connor. And he has a team. The president has a team of doctors. Every president does. It's not unusual.
And Dr. O'Connor pled the fifth when he came before this committee. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I'm aware.
Do you have any knowledge of why Dr. O'Connor would plead the fifth?
I'm assuming it's because he's a doctor, and just out of, that's what would not be uncommon. That's what I believe. I have no idea. I can't speak to anything beyond that.
Well, actually, Ms. Tomasini and Mr. Bernal both also pled the fifth in front of this committee. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware.
Same question. Do you have any knowledge about why they would do that?
I don't have any knowledge.
And to the question of, it was up to Dr. O'Connor whether President Biden should take a cognitive exam. Maybe you already said this, but did you have a conversation with him about that?
No.
And so when did you become aware, or how did you become aware that Dr. O'Connor did not believe that President Biden required a cognitive exam?
When it became a question, a very heavily asked question in the press briefing room.
Maybe I'm confused. So how did you become aware that Dr. O'Connor had said that President Biden did not need a cognitive exam?
I said it's up to, no, what I was trying to say was that it's up to the doctor to make that decision. And you would assume that, that he didn't think that was needed. But that's up to the doctor. That's not up to me. Because I think I was asked, well, why didn't I ask for him to have one? And they said it's up to the medical doctor.
Would it have made your life easier if you had taken a cognitive exam?
I didn't think about it that way. That's not how I thought about it. I thought, this is a medical decision. It's not my decision to make. It's a medical decision. And that was decided on outside of me.
In your role as press secretary, did you advise on what you believed would help the White House regarding what you could tell the press, or were you just given, or did you see your role as taking marching orders and delivering that message?
I saw my role in making sure that the American people had the information that they needed. That was my role. When it came to policy issues, obviously there are policy experts who knew how to talk about those issues. And I would certainly take their lead on those issues. And most of the things that I talked about was connected to a policy, connected to an issue that my colleagues would certainly play a role in on how we spoke about it.
I asked, I think, in the first hour about your impression of the American people's concern, or whether they had concerns about President Biden's mental or cognitive health. And I understand you certainly can't speak for every person, but maybe I'll leave it to you to characterize. Do you think the American people had those types of concerns, that some of them had those types of concerns, or many?
Look, what I know is that polling was often used from reporters about what the American people believed and thought. Obviously, it's a subset of group and it's a snapshot in time. When you talk about polling, that's as far as I can speak to.
I think one of those polls that got brought up to you at the time was a poll from June of 2024 that found that, quote, 72% of voters do not believe that Biden has the mental or cognitive health to serve as president, as well as nearly half of his own party, end quote. And so when we've brought that up to some of our other witnesses, many have made hay out of separating concerns about President Biden's age from concerns about President Biden's mental or cognitive health. And several have said that they believe that the American people were only concerned about his age. And frankly, I don't believe that. I don't think that this poll reflects that either. What do you make of that?
Look, what I can say is, and I think just repeating what I've said multiple times here, is when it comes to his age, he aged. We all do. We saw it. He talked about it. He owned up to how things had changed for him, certainly physically. He talked about that often. And what I can say, my observation deals with his mental acuity, right, is being able to do the job. And this is someone who was able to do the job day in and day out. And that's what I saw. I'm not arguing the age. I don't think any one of us are.
Sure.
We never did. I didn't do that at the podium. But what I wanted to make very clear is that he was more than capable of doing the job. That's what I observed.
And you've made that clear, and I understand. But I think the question is more so, separately of your opinion, this poll says that 72% of voters do not believe that Biden has the mental or cognitive health to serve as president. Does that sound like they were concerned about his age, or does that sound like they were concerned about cognitive and mental health? Granted, those things are associated with age, but it's a separate question. Is that right?
What I can speak to is what I observed. And we've talked about the age. We've all been very honest about that, I think, and we're not trying to change that up, right? We have said this is someone who's aged. We all age. But what I, just speaking for myself, wanted to be clear as someone who saw him on a daily beat, if you will. He was alert. I would have back and forth conversation with him. And he was always looking for information from me. I was always trying to go back and forth with him on an issue that mattered to him and the American people. I mean, we had a lot of conversations, and this is somebody who was certainly alert and aware and focused every single day.
Right. I don't want to belabor the point, but other witnesses have been hesitant to even admit or say that the American people had concerns about President Biden's mental and cognitive health. But my impression, and I think my impression of your testimony today as well, you were fielding questions about that topic somewhat frequently, independently of his age, questions about his cognitive and mental health. Is that right?
I was the White House press secretary. Anything that the press wanted to talk about came through me.
Right, but including that.
I mean, I think I've been pretty clear that that is something that came up a lot in the briefing room for a good part of my tenure as the White House press secretary. It was talked about a lot. It was brought up a lot, and I answered their questions every time I was asked about it.
You said that you would speak with President Biden about inquiries you were receiving from the press. Did you speak with him about inquiries you were receiving about his mental acuity?
I would let him know what the press was thinking about or wanted to talk about, or what was coming up in the briefing room.
What was his response to things like that?
He took it in. I don't remember a specific response, but he would be like, okay.
Really? Like he wouldn't be a little, I would understand if somebody were offended, if they were questioning my mental acuity. But you don't remember any kind of response from President Biden?
As I said just moments ago, it was something that came up all the time. So it wasn't unusual for me to say, this is what's coming up in the briefing room, because it was a constant thread, if you will, narrative of the administration. So it wasn't unusual for me to say to him, hey, this is coming up.
What would you actually say, or was there anything you wouldn't say? And you don't want to offend him by phrasing something a certain way. How would you present? It's a delicate issue.
Yeah.
So how would you present that to him?
I mean, look, I was pretty forthcoming and honest with him, and also he would see the briefings himself sometimes, right? Like he would see the reporting himself, so he saw for himself what people were saying and what the reporting was. So, I mean, wasn't telling him any secrets, right? He saw for himself.
Did he ever, have an opinion about his own mental acuity? I wouldn't be surprised if he did.
Can you say more?
Sure. Did he ever opine on the criticism that he was in some sort of cognitive decline, or maybe he lost his fastball or something like that?
I don't remember anything specific to share. I don't remember anything specific. Again, like I said, this was something that came up quite often.
Are there any issues that you remember that, not just this one, but would elicit an emotional response from President Biden when you were, briefing him on something that the press was asking about?
Nothing specific that I can recall.
What about questions about his family?
Can you?
Sure. What about congressional interest in his son, Hunter Biden? Would that elicit an emotional response from the president?
I don't remember an emotional response, but I would mention it to him if it came up in the briefing room and if he asked.
So your testimony today is President Biden was, when you would relay information to him regarding any issue at all, is pretty stoic, didn't...
What you're asking me are about specific things. I'm not taking a broad brush here. And I said this before, there are many times we would have a back and forth about a particular issue, whether it was the economy or legislation, and we would have a healthy back and forth. I think some issues, he just had to take it in. I think it was him taking it in. I wouldn't characterize it as stoic. I would say he was taking it in, taking in the information.
And not to come back to the same point that I was on, but I don't, I actually appreciate that you have the way that you've characterized this and explaining that, separating out cognitive health and mental health from the age concerns and saying that, you were aware that the press was asking those questions. And I'm only continuing to ask about it because you may be the first, if not one of the few, who've actually had that discussion with us in our interviews. Most of the time, our witnesses have been unwilling to say that the people had concerns about President Biden's mental health.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I didn't say the people had concerns. I'm telling you what the press was asking me, and it was pretty consistent. I can't speak for every person in the country. I can only speak to what I was asked in the briefing room and what the press was asking me, and that was what I was speaking to.
I'm not asking you to speak for every American, but do you think that a significant group, you can characterize the grouping if you'd like, but were the American people concerned about President Biden's cognitive or mental health?
Again, obviously you read me one poll, right, that I was asked about. I cannot do a broad brush and talk about the American people, right? I cannot. It's not something that I can do. What I can tell you is my experience, my observation, and things that we have talked about in the briefing room. The president's talked about his age. It's not something that we did not talk about directly or engage on directly.
So the press was very interested in that topic then. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I've said that multiple times, and the briefings would prove that.
And you don't think that that's a reflection in any way that the American people were also concerned about it?
I mean, I can't speak to I can't speak to that. Every outlet has their reasoning to ask questions. I can't speak to that. My job as the White House press secretary is to answer the questions that are before me.
Thank you.
We can go off the record.
There are two more people that joined, so.
Billy Grant, counsel for the majority.
Hannah Cabby, professional staff at the majority.
Thank you. Ms. Jean-Pierre, in the previous hour, you talked to my colleagues about the president's debate, and they asked you about the reaction to President Biden's performance. As I understood, you do not attribute the president's debate performance to cognitive issues. Is that correct?
No.
And nothing about that debate changed your understanding that Joe Biden was able to execute the duties of the office of the President of the United States, correct?
That's correct.
And my majority colleagues also asked you about a few examples of President Biden misspeaking. And you also again, you do not attribute the president misspeaking to cognitive issues.
I do not. Correct.
And you mentioned, I think, whether it was in your opening or with my majority colleagues, that, presidents misspeak. It's something they do.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to introduce a few examples from President Trump. I would like to introduce the record as Exhibit A, a July article that discusses President Trump forgetting that he appointed Jerome Powell as the Fed chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I would also like to enter into the record as Exhibit B, a New York Times article that discusses President Trump using Nikki Haley with Nancy Pelosi in regards to the January 6th attack.
And then I just want to make sure that
Thank you.
I just want to make sure the record's really clear about one of the questions my colleague just asked you. The first one about whether it's correct that you did not attribute President Biden's debate performance to his cognitive issues.
I do not attribute it to his cognitive issues.
Thank you very much.
And just to be crystal clear on the record, when you say cognitive issues, I want to make sure no one is suggesting there are cognitive issues. You're asking.
Alleged
Alleged
decline.
Yes.
Thank you.
My majority colleagues noted earlier that some of the targets of this investigation chose to invoke their Fifth Amendment rights. Do you recall that conversation?
I do.
I'd like to enter into the record Exhibit C, a Truth Social post by President Trump that states in part, "It was the people that knew he was cognitively impaired and that took over the Autopen. They stole the presidency of the United States and put us in great danger. This is treason at the highest level." A later part of that same post states, "Something very severe should happen to these treasonous thugs." This post was made on May 20th, 2025. 2 days later, Chairman Comer sent his first round of letters requesting transcribed interviews in this investigation. I then would like to enter into the record as Exhibit D, a June 4th, 2025 presidential memoranda, in which President Trump directed the Attorney General to investigate, quote, "whether certain individuals conspired to deceive the public about Biden's mental state and unconstitutionally exercise the authorities and responsibilities of the president." On that same day, Chairman Comer sent additional letters to senior White House officials, former White House officials, requesting transcribed interviews in this investigation. My majority colleagues also quoted earlier from excerpts that appear to have been published from Vice President Harris's upcoming book. You said you have not read the article or the excerpts, is that correct?
That is correct. I have not.
I will just read one more piece of the excerpt to you. "On his worst day, President Biden, was more deeply knowledgeable and more capable of exercising judgment and far more compassionate than Donald Trump on his best.
Move on, record.
Jean-Pierre, were you interviewed by Special Counsel Herb?
No.
How would you describe your involvement in the White House's response to the release of the Her report?
I was at the podium taking questions about it.
Who was, and I'm sure there are multiple people, involved in the formulation of the response to the report of Special Counsel Herb?
It was something that, to my understanding, that Anita Dunn, senior advisor, handled, and with Ian Sams, to my knowledge.
And did you assist with, communication strategy regarding that?
No, I did not. Besides being at the podium.
Besides being at the podium. Is that difficult, being at the podium and not having, really a say in what the communication strategy is?
I think that my job is to execute the strategy. That's the job of the press team, and is to have relationships with the press and do the best that we can to answer their questions. Everybody plays a role, and that's just the job of the White House press secretary.
Did you ever deliver any message from the podium that you believed was not entirely true or accurate?
No.
What was the message conveyed to you, to your recollection, about how you would, what you would deliver regarding the Her report?
I mean, I don't remember the specifics, obviously. I'm on the record in the briefing room talking about it, but I don't remember the specifics. I do know that, I do remember that Ian did most of the handling from the press. What I primarily did was say that they needed to talk to the White House counsel, and Ian handled most of the incoming and even came into the briefing room.
Was the White House, is it fair to say that the White House was not exactly thrilled about the conclusions of the Her report?
I mean,
Are you asking about, sorry to interrupt, are you asking about a particular person or conversation? Or
I was
the
asking about
building?
the general vibe surrounding the Her report, but I can be more specific. Did the people who did formulate the response to the Her report, did they take issue with the conclusions of the Her report?
I don't recall anything specific, like any conversations. I just can't speak to anything directly.
Do you remember? Sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you remember? And I think I'm quoting, but I'm paraphrasing because I'm doing it off the top of my head. But do you remember the conclusion that President Biden would be likely to present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory?
Do I remember?
Do you remember that conclusion from the Her report?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember anybody's, again, from the White House communications team, or really anyone in the White House at large, about people taking particular issue with that statement?
I don't remember specific, more broadly speaking. I think there was a feeling of like they took issue to it, but I couldn't tell you this person, that person. I don't remember having conversations, but more broadly about the feeling of those words.
Well, let's maybe we'll do the exercise that we did earlier. Pretend like it's not a quote. Do you would you agree with the statement
No.
that President Biden is a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory?
That is not how I would characterize the president.
And sorry, not to split hairs here, but I recognize that that's not the way that you would characterize the president. But would you disagree with that statement? That he is a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory.
That's not what I would agree with from my experience and observations.
And we're going to get to the debate here shortly. When we brought Ron Klain in, he said that he, like you and like President Biden, said that President Biden had a bad night that night. He also said that it was a uniquely bad night, in that he had never seen the president appear that way before. Have you ever seen the president appear the way that he did on the debate stage that night?
No.
And just to be clear from one of these hours that we've talked about it, you attribute President Biden's performance that night solely to the fact that he had a cold.
That is something that the president stated himself.
I'm going to play, well, let me ask you this. Have you ever heard the audio from the interview that Special Counsel Hur did, the interview between Special Counsel Hur and President Biden?
Only bits and pieces from the press.
Okay.
That was up there.
We're going to play a portion of it,
Okay.
and then I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
If you can't hear, we can make it louder somehow.
Okay, so now let's talk about the Naval Observatory. So you've been living there for 8 years. So at the end of your vice presidency, what kinds of papers or documents or files were at the Naval Observatory as you were preparing to let you move out?
I'm trying to think. A lot of my speeches, a lot of the initiatives I've taken, a lot of, there are probably some press clippings, I'm guessing. I'm trying to think. What else? Photographs. I don't know.
And where were those dated at the Naval Observatory? You mentioned a couple of workspaces earlier.
Well, if you're talking about anything that was a substantive matter, classified or otherwise, we're not fighting the Judiciary Committee over whether or not I was the guy who wrote the Violence Against Women Act. It was really meant a lot to me. And so they may find stuff with the Violence Against Women Act in one section of a drawer or in the shelf of the library of the Naval Observatory or issues, relating to, I know it doesn't sound strange to you guys, but agriculture is a $4 billion industry. Agriculture is a $4 billion industry in Delaware, Peninsula. And so, or, I have a lot of political things that I don't know where they were, but I know I had material where like there's a whole bunch of stuff around about what made me run for president in the first place, and about how things work out. For example, I was I got a job with them. I didn't take law school very seriously, but I won the international court competition. As a matter of fact, the first time in tort class, we had a really difficult professor, very well-known professor in Syracuse, and he called me beat it.
Okay.
Special Counsel Herr's question to President Biden was, where would documents be stored at the Naval Observatory? I played 3 minutes of President Biden's response. That his response goes on for an additional 9 minutes. During that time, he speaks about the Violence Against Women Act, agriculture in the Delmarva Peninsula, the international moot court competition, moving to Idaho, working at a law firm, the Wilmington Club, the DuPont family, the civil rights movement, reforming the Democratic Party in the South, and his first time running for office. Until Special Counsel Herr interrupts and asks the question again. Do you think that's an example of maybe a bad day for President Biden, how he's responding to those questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to make clear, obviously haven't heard the balance of.
I understand.
The interview wasn't in the room.
Yeah.
You know, this really seems a little bit afield from the type of thing that she would have any firsthand knowledge of beyond, you know, sort of her own personal experiences.
Do you think that it should take 12 minutes to answer the question? Do you think, in your experience, when President Biden received a question that to me appears would require a pretty simple answer, would President Biden ever provide these long-winded 12-minute answers to a simple question?
This is kind of in line of what you heard from Rafi. I wasn't in the room. I don't know what the environment was. I don't know the factors. I've never been in that situation, so I don't know what it feels like. So I can't speak to it with great knowledge in that particular interview and instinct. What I can say, which is what I've been saying multiple times, is that was not my experience with the president in my engagement and interaction with him.
So what you heard just now, the president talking about the Violence Against Women Act, agriculture in the Delmarva Peninsula, that kind of interaction, you never had an interaction like that?
Me personally, engaging with the president, I've never had a reaction like that.
Do you think somebody who, personal opinion, do you think somebody who takes 12 minutes to respond to a simple question like that is fit to run the country?
I'm not sure that's a question that can be answered. I mean, I would like for her to provide an answer, and she's here voluntarily and happy to participate. But I mean, without knowing what the question is, what the context is, you know, it seems fairly, you know, convoluted to just suggest that there's a particular amount of time that is too much for a question to be answered. So, I mean, I would like for her to be able to address the question, but that just feels like something that is not answerable.
Sure, and we can leave it, and unless you would like to answer the question.
I'll leave it.
Go ahead.
We're going to talk a little bit about President Biden's run for re-election, and we talked a little bit about that in the context of former Vice President Kamala Harris's book. But just to go back a little, during and immediately before the 2020 election, was it your impression that President Biden intended to seek a second term?
I don't know what the president's intentions were. We were so focused on the moment and winning. I never even thought beyond that. My focus was, and all of our focus was, on the upcoming election.
Then candidate Biden had said at one point that he intended to be a, quote, bridge to a younger generation of Democratic leaders. Was that your impression as well, that he was going to be a bridge president?
He said this, and I believed him when he said it. Those were his words.
Do you think that implied that he intended to only serve one term?
I wouldn't put too much into that.
So no, you don't believe that implied that?
I mean, you would have to speak to him and ask him what he meant. What I believed he meant was the pick of his vice president. Making history and picking a woman vice president, in this case, a woman of color.
So
I actually just don't understand. He's a bridge candidate by picking Kamala Harris as his running mate?
I think it's picking someone younger and having a ticket that brings everybody together, a unity. I think we even said that during the 2020 campaign.
Thanks.
Unifying. And I think that's how I took it, but you would have to ask him directly, specifically about what he meant by that.
So when did you first understand that President Biden would seek a second term?
When he announced it.
You didn't know before that?
It was his decision to make. It's a personal decision to make.
So inside the White House, were there any discussions or considerations of whether President Biden was physically or mentally fit to seek or serve a second term?
No, not that I was part of, not that I was aware of, and not that I was part of.
And to circle back to the 2020 election, because we're going to talk a little bit about debate prep for 2024. So for 2020, I think you had said that you had some role in preparing Joe Biden for his debates in 2020. Is that right?
Yeah, I was part of the debate prep.
Okay. And were you part of the debate prep team for 2024 as well?
No, I was not.
What did debate prep look like for the 2020 debate?
Again,
Understanding, of course.
I would just say, it was an awkward time, so it was all virtual. There was some moments where there were people there at the location with him, and then there were folks who were virtual. At the time, I had a dual role, so I was virtual for the debate prep. So it was a virtual process because of COVID and because what we were dealing with the protocols.
And how would you say then candidate Biden performed in debate prep during the 2020 race?
At the time, it was the beginning of debate prep, so it was more taking information, reading the documents. That's the part of debate prep that I was involved in 2020 to be specific.
So you weren't involved in any mock debates?
No, because again, I had dual roles, so I was not.
What sort of documents were you preparing for that?
Policy, just kind of domestic policy, for the things that any other candidate would do, just to kind of walk through. That was prepared. That was it. That's what the part that I was involved in.
Did you watch the 2020 presidential debate?
I'm sure I did.
How would you characterize then candidate Biden's performance in that debate?
I believe it was strong.
So you were not at Camp David during the debate prep for the 2024?
No, not
election.
in my role as White House press secretary. I was not involved in campaigns or any political strategy that related to his reelect.
Did you have any conversations about debate prep with any of the people who were there or were involved with it?
If it was informal. It was like, how's it going? Very, very informal. No memo, no specifics. no readout.
It's my understanding that there were certain White House staff
Yes.
present, correct?
Yes.
I guess to kind of re-ask the question, why weren't you there specifically?
From what I understood from White House Counsel, I had a role that it was better not to politicize it, not to be involved in any political decision. It was better just to keep me, in my White House government role and not be involved in that way, in any decision-making strategy or part of the campaign
And not to ask you an awkward question, but you're not unaware of anybody recommending that you don't attend, besides White House counsel providing advice, but nobody in senior staff recommending that you not appear there?
No, it was a White House counsel decision because I was so public. And if you watch the briefing, you probably would understand why.
I watched a lot of them.
Yeah.
So in your, hey, how's it going conversations, informal conversations, I think you said, with people who were involved, what did they say about how it was going?
It was just one person, the communications director, because he was there and we're friends, and he'd be like, "It's going great." It would be one answers. It wouldn't be a full-throated explanation.
So in that conversation or conversations, there was no indication that debate prep was going poorly?
I never got that indication.
Even before debate prep, did you ever hear anybody express any concern about how President Biden would do in a debate in 2024?
No.
The debate happened relatively early in the election cycle compared to other debates. Do you know why that was?
That was a political strategy that I was not involved in.
Following that thread, are you aware of anyone opining that it should be an early debate to push back against any of the narrative or concerns about President Biden's age or ability to do the job?
That wouldn't be a conversation that I would be part of because it's part of the campaign and the strategy. So I was not part of that conversation.
Recognizing that you weren't part of the conversation, but did you hear that?
Oh, did I hear it? Not that I was privy to, not in a conversation that I was involved in.
Any other way that you might have heard that?
Not in a conversation that I was involved with. I would certainly make that assumption, but I was not part of a conversation to make that decision.
Understood.
To understand that you were not involved with debate prep in any way for the 2024 race, were you there on debate night?
Yes.
I think, if I'm recalling correctly, I think there were a couple of different holding rooms or rooms where different staff or campaign staff were watching from. Do you recall who you were sitting with when you watched it?
Correct. I was in a holding room with a mix of White House staff and campaign staff watching the debate.
Do you recall if Ron Klain was in the room with you?
He was in the room with me.
I believe Mr. Klain said at some point during the debate, I believe after the line about beating Medicare, said something on the lines of, "We're effed." Do you recall that?
I don't remember specifics, but I know people were reacting to what we were all watching in the room, but I can't say specifically that's what Ron Klain said. If that's what he said, I can take his word for it.
So in the general reaction to the debate in that holding room, was it clear then that it was a bad night?
I think for many of us, including the president, who said it was a bad night, it was a bad night. But I want to make clear, it was a bad night for not health concerns, but political strategy concerns. That's what was going on in the room.
So what was bad about President Biden's performance?
Look, I think we all watched it. I'm not gonna go into specifics, but we all watched what was happening, and he said it was a bad night. We all watched it. We all agree it was a bad night. It did not go the way that we wanted to.
I understand that. Frankly, I'm interested in your perspective. You have a lot of expertise and you've worked in politics a very long time, and you don't have a specific aspect of it that was poor.
I agree with the way the president characterized it, which was it was a bad night.
Were you part of the spin team that goes out on the floor after these debates and, characterizes the candidate one way or the other?
I would not be, because that would be a political strategy and part of the campaign world, so I would not be part of that.
And just to go back to what you said, you attributed a lot of President Biden's appearance to a cold. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I've attributed it. I've said that on the record many times.
When did you first learn that President Biden had a cold?
When I was in the room.
So while he was on stage, somebody informed you that he had a cold?
Look, I had not seen him that day. Others in the room had, and had conversations with him. I was on the plane with him, but did not speak with him directly before the debate. And so folks who had talked to him said that he had a cold.
And that was while he was debating, somebody informed you?
I was informed that he had a cold, and one of the reasons I was informed that is because press was asking. There was inquiries from press asking if he was sick.
Do you remember who told you that?
I don't. There was a lot going on in that room, as you can imagine, during a debate.
So to be clear, he had already started debating when you found that out?
Yes, because we heard him speaking and his voice, and it was hoarse. And so that was what that's what was shared with me.
In a recently released interview, the president's son, Hunter Biden, told Andrew Callahan that, quote, they gave him Ambien to be able to sleep, and he gets up on stage and looks like a deer in the headlights. Do you have any knowledge of President Biden taking Ambien ever?
No.
Do you have knowledge of anyone on the president's team providing medication to the president?
No.
And just to clarify, because my question was ambiguous, do you have any knowledge of anyone in the White House providing the president medication other than Dr. O'Connor?
No.
Did you discuss the president's performance after the debate with him directly?
I had a brief conversation on the incoming that I was having, that I was getting from the press about the debate, because he asked.
And what did you talk about?
I can't remember the specifics, but I shared with him the incoming that I was receiving, that we were all receiving.
Did he express any regrets about what he had said or how he had performed, other than saying, of course, that it was a bad night? Did he get any more specific than that?
He did not get more specific than that.
Did you have any conversations with other senior staff at the White House about President Biden's performance?
I mean, likely, yes. We talked about it.
So conversations that involved discussions of why he performed like that?
We talked about the debate, the incoming that we were getting, and how to respond to reporters.
How are you directed to respond to reporters?
We shared basically what I shared before, that he had a cold. They also asked me if he was tested for COVID. We said yes, but he did not have COVID. Those were the things that we shared, and it was a bad night.
Were there any additional talking points that were suggested or you put in the book that weren't put out?
Just for some clarity, it wasn't talking points. It wasn't in the book. We were traveling. We were on the road. It was just trying to get in real time answers to questions that reporters were asking.
So, but did anybody suggest a different narrative other than that he had had a cold for
No.
why he'd perform like that?
No.
Did anyone ever advocate for the president to be more public facing after the debate, to do more press conferences or anything of that sort to you?
So I will say this, as it relates to public facing and his schedule, we went from, if I remember, which was always the plan, we went from Atlanta to North Carolina to New York to New Jersey. We had a full, like 2-3 days of a 4-state swing. And that's if I'm remembering the numbers of states and the amount of days. But we had a pretty full, robust schedule coming out of the debate. And I will just add where the president engaged with supporters, took pictures, talked to them, spoke in front of them, and he was out there for the American people to see him directly after the debate.
But
for two days in 4 states, I believe.
But are you aware of any members of senior staff recommending or advising that he do more than that? To be more public facing than he was being?
I mean, there was always conversation about him continuing to be public facing. There was always conversation about, him being out there, especially for the campaign, right? It was a campaign. So those conversations were always happening. Where can we send him? Where does he need to go? Obviously, a lot of that was strategic and from the campaign side because we were a few months out from the election.
But do you recall anybody specific recommending that in the wake of the debate?
I don't remember anybody specific, but it was a conversation that was consistently had to continue for him to be out there.
At this point, immediately after the debate, did you believe that President Biden should stay in the race?
Look, what I believe is when it comes to something like this, to run for re-election, run for election, make these types of decisions, it is something that is very personal. And my job is to support the president in whatever decision that he wants to make. My understanding was at that time that he was still in it and he was still going to continue to run for re-election. I did not think anything else out of that. I did not have an opinion. My only thing was let me support the White House, this president, the best way that I could.
And I do understand that was your job, and thank you for that. But you're also a citizen of this country. Did you think that President Biden was the best candidate at that point to be the Democratic nominee for president?
Well, that's a different question. You just asked me. Yes.
But the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. That's what I said. Yeah.
A lot of questions flying
I know.
around.
You just asked me a completely different question, and the answer to that question is yes.
And maybe I'll save us some time. Did you believe that up until the day that President Biden dropped out of the race? Did you believe that President Biden should be the Democratic candidate for president up until the day that he dropped out of the race?
Yes. Again, personal decision, something for him to make, but yes.
But you can support somebody's personal decision and not tell them that you disagree with it. Privately disagreeing with it is different. So did you have personal opinions that you didn't share that President Biden should step aside earlier than he did?
Well, your colleague just asked me that I think that the president, and I'm paraphrasing here, was the right person for that moment to be nominee for the Democratic Party, and I said yes. So I think that answers what I believe. That I believe that he was the right person in that moment to run for president. I think that answers that question.
Did anybody that you're aware of on the campaign or in the White House have a different view than you? Did anybody start having reservations about whether President Biden should stay in the race?
Not directly. I never had a conversation with anybody about that.
Did you hear of conversations that you weren't part of where that was raised?
No. And when it came to the campaign, I just wasn't engaged with people on a regular basis. So I couldn't even tell you what was going on the campaign and people's feelings.
At one point I believe it was on Morning Joe, President Biden implied that, or said directly that it was the elites in the Democratic Party that were pressuring him to step aside. Do you think that's true?
Look, I think there were a lot of factors that led to the president to decide not to run. He wrote about it. There's a statement that he put out, and I would just let him speak to it. I mean, he was very clear when he made that decision, why he wanted to, and he did an Oval Office address laying out his thought process.
Do you believe that the pressure for President Biden to drop out was from the Democratic Party elites?
I think there were a lot of factors that played into his decision.
Was that one of them?
I believe there were a lot of factors that played into his decision, and he laid it out, his thought process, and it was, he put out a statement about it, and again, did an Oval Office address.
Do you think there were a lot of pundits, there were Democratic politicians on the Hill who would eventually come out and be in favor of Joe Biden dropping out of the race. Most of that occurred in the wake of President Biden's debate performance. Sitting here today, we're a year past Joe Biden dropping out of the race. With the benefit of hindsight, do you just think that all of that was an overreaction to Joe Biden's performance during one debate?
That strikes me as more of like a political science question than a mental acuity question. I mean, is there a question about sort of his performance and
I'll be honest, other witnesses, I've asked the same question to other witnesses, and they actually didn't have a problem answering that question. The question being, do you think that this was an overreaction on the part of the Democratic Party to push Joe Biden out of the race?
Again, I don't have a problem with an answer. I'm just pointing out that it seems far afield from what brings us here today.
Well, I'm happy to respond to that. The investigation is about Joe Biden's decision-making, and one of the biggest decisions that Joe Biden made during his presidency was dropping out of the race. And I'm interested to know what was behind that decision.
Understood, and I think if Ms. Jean-Pierre has personal knowledge from the time or anything that's relevant, she should obviously answer the question. I just wanted to make sure that it's something she's able to speak to and not just opining on sort of the politics of the day.
I'll tell you what, you don't even have to answer the question. The question being, do you think it was an overreaction on the part of the Democratic Party and punditry to pressure Joe Biden to drop out of the race? Would you like to respond to that?
So something that you just said that I think is also important, that you said that you were trying to figure out what was behind the decision of President Biden making a very difficult, very personal decision. I do not know, right? I know from what he wrote and put out in the statement. I was not part of his thought. What I don't know is I wasn't part of his thought process. I wasn't in the room when he was making this decision. I wasn't in a room when he was talking to his family. I was not in the room. I learned maybe 20 minutes before everybody else in the world learned that he had made this decision. It is an incredibly personal decision. It was for him to make alone. Was I surprised? Yes, because I thought we were going to continue the re-election and move forward. That's the best way that I can answer that question.
Thank you. And I told you we'd return to it, so I want to return to it. There is your book, which we have not read. We await it, bated breath. A description is a word that is used to describe something that you talk about as betrayal. So I want to talk about that. Who betrayed whom?
What I was talking about is stepping out from the Democratic Party, from a two-party system that I felt we needed to really take a hard look at and see what works and what doesn't work. It was a feeling of, and there were many factors that played into this, of I want to do this in a space where I can look at it in an independent light. And that is what I was talking about, stepping away from the two-party system, stepping away from a party that I had been part of for a long time. Still believe in the ideology, still believe in what the Biden-Harris administration did, but I wanted to step away from it.
It being the two-party system.
The two-party system. It being the two-party system as a whole.
Okay, this is my least favorite part of the job, but I don't think you answered the question. Who betrayed whom?
Again, I wanted to step away from a two-party system that I didn't feel like was working.
Do you believe that the Democratic Party betrayed you?
I believe that that is something that certainly the president will speak to. I do have my thoughts about that, but I think at the end of the day, I am still very much part of what the Democrats stand for. I want to do it in my own way and from the outside, and I feel like I can have a better effect in doing that.
Do you believe that the Democratic Party betrayed Joe Biden?
I think many historians will write that tale.
Do you believe Joe Biden betrayed you?
No. Remember, I stayed till the end.
You know, I actually have another question. I'm not looking for spoilers on your book.
You're trying.
But you know, I do want to be clear that is it your testimony today that your book will not make reference to President Biden's health, his cognitive ability, or any inability to do the job of the presidency?
What I will say is the questions that you're asking me today, I'm answering them accurately and completely, and I am not deviating from what I have said at the podium on the record.
Will your book make any reference to President Biden's health, his cognitive ability, or inability to do the job of president?
And again, I've talked about this. I've been very clear that from my perspective, from what I saw, the president was always able to do the job. I talk about the 3 weeks. I talk about it from my perspective, and I talk about things that happened from the podium, and nothing that I'm telling you right now deviates from what I said in public.
Do you talk about in the book anything that involves the president's health, his cognitive ability, or his inability to do the job?
Well, I would say that I never thought that he was unable to was not able to do the job. So that's not how I would characterize how the president performed as president of the United States. He was always capable of doing the job. And again, I do talk about the 3 weeks of that period between the debate. I mean, it pretty much says that. to when he decided from my point of view, from what I point of view. I'm speaking from like what I has said at the podium.
What does your book say about the president's health?
I think I'm just going to interject. I think she's repeatedly telling you she's just characterizing it differently, but she's saying she's consistent with what she said on the podium, with what she's saying here, and what's in her book.
I understand, and the last thing I want to do is read the book, and see something that is, if not inconsistent, but is being left out from this interview, and have questions, and then we all have to come back here and me asking more questions. I would really just like a straight response, straight answer.
It is our expectation that that will not happen.
Right.
And I would love for that to be my expectation as well, but it's currently not. So
the way you're phrasing the question, she's saying that those same themes about the 3 weeks where she's getting incoming from press, all the things that we've just been talked about are also discussed in her book consistently.
Inconsistent with the discussion today. I think that's the message.
And my question is, what is the book going to say about this?
Everything that I'm answering today to all of you.
Okay.
I said that.
Okay.
There will be no discrepancies.
Ultimately, President Biden's decision to drop out, understanding, of course, that was his decision to make. Did you think that was the right decision?
Again, that was his decision to make. It was his decision to make. Now, if you're asking me if I was disappointed, if I was surprised, yes, because I thought we were going to continue. Again, and the reason why, because he made that decision, that personal decision for himself.
We're going to switch gears a little here to the press asked you on numerous occasions whether President Biden planned to pardon his son, Hunter, and you repeatedly and adamantly said that he would not. Is that right?
Yes, because that's what I knew the answer to be at the time.
And of course, he eventually did pardon his son, Hunter Biden. Is that correct?
Correct.
When did you learn that he intended to pardon Hunter?
It was a short timeline when I learned from the time I learned to the time that we shared it with the press. A very short timeline.
Meaning like the same day, or?
I honestly don't have a actual amount of time, but it was a short timeline. Like maybe I found out the night before and we announced it the day before. It was very, very short period of time.
And the basis of your understanding before he ultimately did decide to do it, the basis of your understanding that he would not pardon Hunter Biden, was that a conversation you had with him directly? Or?
No, I did not have a conversation with him about it.
And would that be, who would that be that you would talk to about that?
I mean, we put out a statement that he was very involved in his thought process about his decision to pardon his son. And that's what I understood it to be. That's what he wanted to make sure that the American people had. I was not part of any conversation on that.
And I'm sorry if my question was confusing, but before, when your answer at the podium was that he would not pardon his son, you were saying that because you had spoken to him and he said he wouldn't?
I understand. I thought you meant when he actually made the decision. Yes, it's something that he had said multiple times. He said it in public on the record, is what I knew to be true at the time. And that's what I repeated, something that he was very clear about during that period of time when I said he would not.
When President Biden would be given talking point cards for a specific issue, is that something you'd be involved in generally?
If it relates to the press or inquiry that was coming from the press, yes.
I can introduce if it's easier, but at first I can just represent it to you.
Mhm.
There was a tweet by Alex Thompson from September 8th, to just a few days ago, that,
Like a year ago, September?
I'm sorry, just a few days ago.
Oh,
this
currently.
week,
Okay, pardon.
that included a document which was a talking points card dated December 1st, 2024. One of the talking points is a bolded header that says, "When did you," in all caps, decide to do this? With regard to why did you change your mind to pardon Hunter? And then under the "when did you decide to do this" header, it says, "made the decision this weekend." Is that a normal talking point for a card like that?
Can we take a look at if you've got
Yeah, 'cause I
in mind?
haven't,
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's just go off the record for go off the record.
I'll introduce as Exhibit 2 the tweet that I was mentioning earlier from Alex Thompson. And as you can see, it's dated December 1st, 2024. Firstly, have you seen this before?
So it would not be unusual for me to have put together or be part of with the comms team and putting notes like this. Is not unusual for any president, to be quite honest, to have cards or notes from the press or comms team. I don't remember this particular specific one, but it wouldn't be. I would normally be involved in this.
And of course, this is a talking points sheet, notes with regard to the president changing his mind about pardoning his son. And it strikes me as odd that he would require a talking point for when he made the decision, when it was only apparently the previous weekend. Is that unusual?
It's not unusual. So just to give you a little bit of the process here is that my job as the White House press secretary and also the communications director job is to make sure whatever questions that we think, because he engages with the press pretty regularly. I think I said he engaged with the press unofficially over 670 times, right? So this was a regular occurrence. So he saw the press all the time. And members of the press travel with the president pretty regularly. So we would put together, like I've said before, daily news summary, daily notes. And we're talking about one card, but there were probably other cards here on whatever issue topics of the day. And I would look at it just like a memo that he would be getting just to let him know, hey, this is what's up, this is what's going on, and this is probably what you're going to hear. So it was not unusual. It's not uncommon for presidents or principals or candidates to have these types of notes that they're going to be getting from the press.
That all makes sense. I guess to me still strikes me as odd that, this seems like a pretty big decision. He's going back on something that he had said he wouldn't do, and now he's doing it, and it's with regard to his son, and he made the decision only in the previous days. Yeah. Is it not odd to you that he would need to be reminded that it was just...
It's not odd because we did this consistently, made sure that he had what was on the minds of the press. It's something that we did daily. And this would be it. This in this moment, dated, right? This would be something that the press was focused on. So it's not unusual. Candidates do this. Other principals do this. It's not unusual.
Were you surprised that President Biden changed his mind about pardoning his son?
Yeah, I was surprised.
Why?
Because we had said that he wouldn't. But again, his decision to make, very personal decision, and he laid out in a statement why he made that decision.
And I know we got a little my question got confusing the last time, but for the record, to be clear, did you have a conversation directly with President Biden about his reversal, about when he eventually decided to pardon his son?
If you're asking me if I had a conversation about his thought process, the decision making, no.
And did you just discuss that with anybody else?
No.
So are you directly aware of when he made the decision to pardon his son?
I mean, he shares it in his statement.
What is the question outside of that? Is she aware of anything outside of what he has said or what's in the statement?
Yeah, do you have any direct knowledge of the process by which President Biden came to make that decision, besides his public statement?
No, besides his public statement, no.
Did you ever hear any conversation, any rumor that President Biden was considering pardoning his son while you were going to the podium and saying he would in fact not do that?
Are you asking me from like internally?
Yes, ma'am.
No. Like internally from the White House?
Yes, ma'am.
No.
Why do you believe he changed his mind?
I mean, I would just refer back to the statement that he put out about it. Personal decision that he made. Difficult decision for him to make, but he made it.
Did you ever speak with anybody from Hunter Biden's legal team?
No.
Did you ever speak with Hunter Biden?
If you're asking me if I've ever spoke to Hunter Biden about his legal or pardons or anything like that.
I'll get there, but let's start generally.
I mean, I would see him from time to time with his family, but we did not talk about this.
You never talked with Hunter Biden about any of his legal issues?
No.
And you never spoke with Hunter Biden about any congressional inquiry into Hunter Biden? Going back to the binder, who would insert information into the binder about pardons, if you know?
Are you asking me who would like help formulate the questions or formulate the response?
Or the response, yes, ma'am.
I believe that came from the comms team primarily.
Do you know if anyone had pardons as their portfolio?
Not specifically, no. Not that I remember, no.
Do you know if Anita Dunn was involved?
She was not there by that point. We're talking about December of 2024. So this was all towards or even January, actually. This was the end of the administration.
That's right.
So you couldn't pinpoint a particular person or a couple people who were inserting information into the binder about pardons?
Well, I would say it was the communications team, right? The communications director was involved. That's where I would say that it came from.
Did you ever speak with President Biden about pardons?
I mean, we were, again, this was like the last couple of days of the administration, so I never had a specific conversation with him about it, no.
And just so I'm clear, we're talking about the pardon of Hunter Biden. Did you have any, I'll rephrase the question. Did you ever have any conversation with President Biden about the pardon of Hunter Biden?
No, before he...
Before or after?
No, I did not.
Did you ever have a conversation with President Biden about the later pardons of any member of his family, before or after?
That's what I was speaking to prior, which is, it was towards I think it was like the last day of the administration, so there was no time to talk about that. The only time I talk to the president about the pardon is as I explain, when I tell him what's on the mind of the press, what I'm getting in the press briefing room, and I would bring it up in that way, but we never had a direct conversation about it.
And I just want to clarify on that to make sure there's no confusion. Are you talking about the theoretical question of would the president pardon Hunter Biden or after he had made the decision?
I've never talked to him about him pardoning his son Hunter. We never had a conversation. What I was trying to say is, if it was on the mind of the press, I would say, this is what the press is asking me. But we never had a conversation about it. About his decision or anything like that.
So that what you would deliver to the press, that just was from the briefing book I'll rephrase. When you would tell the press that the president does not intend to pardon his son, Hunter, that you were getting that information purely from the briefing book?
No, I think I made that clear, that the president said it himself, right? This is, when I said it at the podium, the president had also said it, whether at a gaggle or in an interview, a sit-down interview, which he did 151 of sit-down interviews. He would, if he were asked during that time, he would answer it and say no. So it came from the President of the United States.
Were you at all aggrieved when the president did the exact opposite of what you had been saying from the podium?
Was I aggrieved? No.
Okay, we'll stop right there.
Oh.
Ms. Jean-Pierre, in the last hour, my majority colleagues talked to you about her report and the president's response to a question, and they seem to intimate that a long-winded answer was some indication of cognitive decline or the president's inability to do the job. Would you say in your experience that President Biden is known for being long-winded?
Yes, he is known for being long-winded.
So is that abnormal for him to give lengthy answers to questions that most people would take a shorter amount of time?
True, yes.
Okay, so it's fair to say that because Joe Biden gave a long-winded answer to the question by Special Counsel Hurd is not an indication that he was unable to do his job.
Correct.
Ms. Jean-Pierre, thank you again for appearing today.
Thank you for having me.
I just want to clarify for the record, and I know this has been discussed a few times, you were here voluntarily, is that right?
Yes, I am.
And you have been asked a variety of questions by my Republican colleagues about different events spanning numerous years. I just want to be very clear that you are answering these questions to the best of your recollection, is that right?
Yes, I am.
And I also want to ask you, during your time at the White House, was there a grand conspiracy to cover up the mental decline of President Biden from the public?
No.
We'll leave it there. Go off there.
Actually, I had a few follow-up questions about pardons. Were you in meetings or have discussions about the pardon of Dr. Fauci?
No, I was not.
Were you in meetings or did you participate in any discussions regarding the pardon of General Milley?
No, I was not.
Were you in meetings or part of any discussions regarding the pardon of January 6th committee members and staff?
No, I was not.
Did anyone discuss these pardons with you?
The decision process? No.
So the only discussions that you would have on these would be how you would communicate them from the podium?
Correct.
Thank you.
Or to the press more generally.
Yes, ma'am.
And these are related questions, just thinking more broadly of other types of executive actions, such as executive orders or signing bills or things of that nature. We talked about it a little bit in the context of the very senior staff and senior staff meetings that occurred each morning. And I feel free to correct me, but I think what you said was that those things would come up during those meetings, but it sounded like that was not a meeting where the decision process was discussed at length. Is that?
That's correct. I would see those meetings in the morning as more like a check-in meeting, and I think I said that earlier.
So were you involved in any meetings or discussions that were more substantive than that with regard to making other types of executive decisions like executive orders?
No.
So same question that my colleague just asked you. You would essentially only have conversations about those types of actions in the context of answering questions on the podium or telling somebody that you had been receiving questions about them.
That's right. That's correct.
So do you have any understanding of what the process for getting the sign off from the president on a given executive action was?
Can I step back from your previous question?
Sure.
There would be times where we would look at the week ahead and we would say the president's going to potentially make this announcement or that announcement, but I was never part of the decision making. I was never part of how I wasn't in the room for those particular executive orders or decisions being made.
Sure. So do you have an awareness of what the process looked like for making an executive decision or getting the president's sign off on it?
No.
Were you ever in the room when somebody gave a verbal authorization? I'll start again. When our understanding is that there is a decision card or decision memo that goes to the president, and that he signs that, basically indicating his intention to do whatever executive action. Were you ever in the room when somebody verbally communicated that the president intended to do something when you knew he had not signed?
No, I'm not aware of that.
And similarly, are you familiar with the process by which official documents are signed with the Autopen?
No.
Was the Autopen ever something that came up? Were there ever talking points in your briefing book about the Autopen?
Not that I recall.
Do you have any knowledge of President Biden's political advisors weighing in on any health care he should or should not receive?
No.
Were you present for any of President Biden's meetings with Dr. Kevin O'Connor?
No.
Do you know who would attend those meetings?
I would not.
Okay. Are you aware of anyone in the White House advocating for you to no longer be press secretary?
I don't. I mean, there were a lot of stories written, as you know, but all I can say is I stayed as press secretary till the end.
Yes, ma'am. I do know, and one of those stories was that Anita Dunn had advocated for you to no longer be press secretary. Do you have any knowledge of that?
I know of the story. I can't speak to the validity of the story, but I am aware that it's out there and exists.
Did Ms. Dunn ever raise anything with you about no longer being press secretary?
What I will say is that we had a professional relationship. In these types of high stakes type of jobs, are there disagreements? Yes, there are disagreements. Did we have disagreements? Yes, we had disagreements. But all in all, our relationship we kept it on a professional level.
There have been a number of books released in the months following Joe Biden leaving office.
I hear there are better ones coming out. Sorry.
Just for the record.
Just for the record.
I have no reason to doubt you.
I know you're gonna read it. I can see it.
Did you ever speak with Jake Tapper or Alex Thompson for their book Original Sin?
No.
Yes. You were not a source for this book?
No.
Did you speak with Chris Whipple for the book Uncharted?
No.
Did you speak with Josh Dawsey, Tyler Pager, or Isaac Armsdorf for their book 2024?
No.
Did you ever discourage people from speaking with any of these people that I just said, from speaking with them?
No.
It's my understanding actually that for the book Original Sin, there was somewhat of a strategy to encourage people in the White House to speak with Mr. Thompson or Mr. Tapper. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that, yes.
Did anyone ask you to speak?
No.
Do you know what rationale underlay that decision to have them speak?
My guess would be the book is going to be written anyway, so maybe folks can help with the narrative of the book.
Have you read the book?
No, I've not read the book.
There are several unnamed cabinet secretaries in the book. Do you know who those were?
I didn't read it, so I can't even speak to it.
Off the record.
You said previously you're not aware of the Autopen process, but just so for the record, we just want to ask you a couple questions. Ms. Jean-Pierre, to your knowledge, are you aware of any instance where an executive order issued during the Biden presidency was signed by Autopen without President Biden's knowledge or authorization?
To my knowledge, no.
And to your knowledge, are you aware of any instance in which the Autopen was used to sign a presidential memorandum issued during the Biden presidency without President Biden's knowledge or authorization?
To my knowledge, no.
And to your knowledge, are you aware of any instance in which the Autopen was used to sign a pardon issued during the Biden presidency without President Biden's knowledge or authorization?
To my knowledge, no.
And lastly, to your knowledge, are you aware of any instance in which the Autopen was used to sign an order granting clemency issued during the Biden presidency without President Biden's knowledge or authorization?
To my knowledge, no.
Go off the record.